Really excited to welcome everybody here today. My name is Rhiannon Price, and I have the privilege of leading NASA Lifelines. Welcome, welcome. Today, you are here for the Ready for Impact showcase. Let me go ahead to. Here for the Ready for Impact showcase, we have fantastic teams here who are ready to show all of their innovation and all of the incredible work that they are doing today. So please give them a big, warm welcome. I'm also going to, first of all, talk about all of the incredible, bold ideas, fresh perspectives, powerful solutions that they bring to the table. Over the course of this session, these teams are going to share how they're tackling some of the world's most pressing challenges that we faced. Our expert panelists are going to be listening closely, and they're not going to hold back. They'll be jumping in with thoughtful questions and insights to push our thinking even further. And of course, those of you in the audience should know this is not a spectator sport. You will also play a critical role. So after each round, you'll get the chance to actually participate in a crowd vote to help shape what happens next. So each person in attendance should have received an email with your unique link to vote. That's the way that we make sure everyone's above board, no cheating, one link, one vote. So stay tuned until the end when we'll reveal the results for the crowd vote as well, and make sure you get those in before you sign off. Last year, we had 11 teams from around the world pitching their work. And since then, those teams have been able to secure major funding, they've won awards, and they've scaled their impact. I want to highlight just a few from that incredible cohort. We had Oregon State University, who secured nearly $1 million in funding from NASA, IBM, and ESA to support their damage assessment foundational model work. OSU and Partners also just won the prestigious European Space Agency Earth Observation Excellence Award. Bravo to Jamin and OSU and the team there for their incredible work. It's really fantastic. They continue to release critical data over places like Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, as well as the fire damage in LA earlier this year. I would love to put another spotlight on our partners at UNICEF, who have integrated satellite data into their Geospatial platform since pitching in our showcase. Using Geospatial, UNICEF decision makers and their partners can actually understand how current and near future conditions intersect with vulnerability to inform resilience and emergency preparedness planning. So congrats to the UNICEF team for taking that forward. And yet another success story with support from the Lifelines community, WFP and partners are improving logistics coordination and enabling route optimization with their platform Log.IE, using satellite data for road accessibility monitoring and optimization in places like Lebanon. The logistics cluster can actually enhance its effectiveness in those operations and improve the safety of first responders as well. So that's just a few. I won't go through them all, but please give a big virtual round of applause for last year's finalists as they continue on their journeys as well, and really set the bar high for these incredible teams who are joining us here today. But before I turn it over, I'm excited to also introduce and thank our incredible panelists. They represent organizations like Grand Challenges Canada, Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, Amazon Web Services, Taylor Geospatial Engine, and Mercy Corps Ventures. I'll let them introduce themselves, but Nachiket, Danielle, Joe, Jen, Maria, we're grateful for your time today, as well as your commitment to innovation and service of humanitarian impact. So big thank you to you as well. Our panelists are going to bring their own expertise and experiences, as well as their organizations funding networks, critical data and tools and infrastructure. And we couldn't scale this work without them. So we're excited to hear their thoughts and really hear where we can go together. We're privileged today to be a part of an amazing and resilient global community, and you'll see that reflected in today's lineup. The range of solutions and expertise is impressive, and it's a really great reflection of the depth and the breadth of the value of satellite data in humanitarian decision making. You're going to hear from Sonder Collective, CHAI, Urban Malaria Lab, Duke and MIT, Amnesty International and Better Planet Lab, the UN Environment Program, the Center for Geospatial Analytics at North Carolina State University, MapBiomas, Agrisight from DUSSOFT Congo, UNIOM. But first up, I'd love to welcome, with a sea of clapping hands, please, our friends over at NAXA. I met Uttam at SAT Summit in 2024, where he participated in the inaugural Lifeline Scientist Speed Dating event. Since then, he, Poonam, and the team at NAXA have made significant progress in their work to protect the most vulnerable. Our first stop on our global tour and showcase today is going to take us to Nepal to hear from NAXA and their life-saving work before a crisis hits. Over to you, Uttam.
Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes. Hi, Rihanna. Are we audible?
Yes, you're great.
Yeah,
over to you, Uttam and Poonam.
Okay, so hi, everyone. Namaste from Nepal. I am Poonam Sherpa, Business Development at DASTAA. And along with me, I have my colleague, Uttam Pudasaini. He's a product lead at DASTAA. DASTAA is a digital platform that we built to save life in low-income, disaster-prone communities using Earth observation technologies and citizen science for multi-hazard risk assessment and enhanced anticipatory action. So within a decade, the world has experienced over 6,000 disaster events affecting 1.6 billion people, and these events have claimed over 400,000 people, caused an estimated of $2.13 billion in damages. So among these many disaster events, let me share a story from Dodara Chandani municipality, a disaster-prone city in far west Nepal. In 2023, Dodara experienced a flooding, and though it was not a huge flooding incident, 8 people lost their lives and more than 500 people were impacted. And among the impacted was Kalawati, a mother of 4 from a marginalized farming community. And the flood took everything, her house, her livestock, and important legal document. And this happened because her house was in a high risk area, and the categorization of her community as a medium risk area was not sufficient enough to calculate the uniqueness of each household in Dodara. She did not receive any early warning messages or information on time to prepare ahead of flooding. And the evacuation center in her areas were poorly coordinated. And this is the reality of many people in disaster-prone city like Dodara globally. Now, fast forward to 2024, unfortunately, another event happened at Dodara. Another flood hit Dodara Chandani. And this time, it was the highest rainfall in 78 years. Imagine 624 millimeters of rainfall in a single day. And the projected death toll was 250 people, but fortunately, there were 0 casualties. And this was possible because our solution DASTAA was implemented under the leadership of local government. And this time, we did 3 things differently. Our DASTAA solution was used to survey and categorize every household into low, medium, and high risks. Targeted early warning messages were sent in local languages via social media, IVR, and SMS. And finally, we did data-driven evacuation planning and were able to evacuate thousands of highly risked population in a safe shelter. So because of this preparedness-focused approach at DASTAA, Kalawati, her children, and her neighbor were confident enough to move to a safe shelter. Now, further talk about DASTAA, I would like to invite my colleague Uttam.
Thank you so much, Poonam. Hi, everyone. This is Uttam Pudasaini, product lead at DASTAA. So to understand DASTAA better, it is an integrated modular platform that is designed for effective disaster preparedness and anticipatory action. Our vision at DASTAA is to shift the disaster management paradigm from currently existing response-based approach to data and technology-driven, preparedness-driven approach. And why? Because we want to focus on disaster preparedness and data-driven anticipatory action. So to understand how DASTAA works in a real context, let's consider a community. This is the flood-prone community. And if we are implementing DASTAA in this location, then DASTAA begins by helping with the design and management of household level survey as shown under number 1. The local youth, they are trained on how to do digital data collection using their smartphone, and using the DASTAA mobile application, they can do the risk assessment survey. DASTAA can then compile the data from multiple sources, from household level survey, from the DHM, from satellite, from ground sensors, local emergency operation centers, and other different sources. Once these data sets are compiled into the platform, the risk assessment engine inside DASTAA can categorize the households into 3 categories: red, green, and yellow, based on the risk and composite vulnerability. Once the risk computation is completed, using the risk communication module in DASTAA, organizations or local government can send risk communication in different formats. If the local population has access to a smartphone, they get push notifications. If not, they will get SMS and IVR, in order to ensure no one is left behind when it comes to early warning. And these household level data sets within DASTAA is also then utilized for different early action planning, such as humanitarian cash transfer management or distribution of different relief items. To understand the use of satellite data within DASTAA, if we have better access to satellite data sets, we can have better hazard model, whether it's flood or landslide. Likewise, the access to satellite imageries helps in conducting rapid assessment in an immediate disaster context. In a flooding scenario, if we have access to time series satellite data sets, we can also conduct change analysis of the river course, and also it helps to optimize the hazard models. There are a lot of solutions related to risk assessment in the market, but what makes DASTAA unique? It's not just the technology that makes DASTAA unique. It's the focus on the household level risk assessment, the approach that we are trying to pitch in this low income disaster prone community, which is to shift from community based to household based risk assessment. And DASTAA works offline. If they have to do risk assessment survey, they can do it offline in the remote areas. Moreover, it is a one-stop solution for anticipatory action, starting from survey design up to early action planning. And as I said earlier, it is a modular platform. That means if UNICEF wants to do risk assessment only, they can only use it for risk assessment. If Mercy Corps wants to do cash transfer management, they can utilize that particular module for that particular purpose. And interestingly, because our solution is focused on low income disaster prone communities, if there are no weather stations or if there are limited weather stations, DASTAA focuses on integrating citizen science approach for localized weather data collection. Because of these scalable features of DASTAA, we have been able to create impact in Nepal and Bangladesh. DASTAA has been used to conduct 30,000 risk assessment surveys. 80,000 risk communication messages has been sent using DASTAA. And then the data set in DASTAA have been utilized for evacuation of 250 people before the disaster. And we have also been able to achieve some target sustainable development goals, such as the goal number 11, 17, and 13, which is the climate action. And this has been possible not just because of the technology. There is a team of passionate young individuals with the lived experience who are from the global south, from Nepal, or the multi-hazard prone country, and who have the experience in climate tech and climate adaptation by experiencing the challenges themselves. And there is a team of 4 organizations. NAXA and Nepal Flying Lab is developing the technology. IHRR, Institute of Risk Reduction, is doing multi-hazard risk analysis. And there is DCA as the humanitarian partner that leads all the humanitarian side of it. And because of this impact that we have created, it has been possible due to the support from organizations like GSMA, Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, and Twilio Climate Tech Prize. So as we are currently working on scaling of DASTAA technologically and also geographic scaling, there are 3 particular support we would like to ask. We need data support. Because this is a program with NASA, we need access to high-resolution DEM, such as TerraSAR-X. We need high-resolution satellite imagery and high-resolution weather and climate data set, so that we can optimize the service, the data service that we provide with DASTAA. If we have better technology infrastructures, we can perform our operations more efficiently. For example, if we have access to AWS S3 for storage, AWS EC2 for computing, then we can perform our service much more efficiently. The good news, DASTAA has already collected, we have been able to collect around $545,000 in terms of grant funding from different organizations. And currently we are looking for the remaining amount of money to reach the 1.25 million so that we have the necessary resource to not just expand DASTAA, but to create more impact globally. Before I complete my presentation, before I end it, I would like to take a pause and think about Kalavati one more time. You can see at the image, Kalavati looks happy here in the image. Thanks to DASTAA's data-driven action, Kalavati, her children, and her family, they were able to reach the safe shelters ahead of time because they were evacuated by emergency personnel who had the necessary training, who had the necessary information, who had the access to household level data sets. So join us in scaling DASTAA so that we can reach million more like Kalavati and then strengthen preparedness, protect lives before crisis happens. Thank you, and let's work together in scaling of DASTAA for enhanced anticipatory action. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Uttam. And I would love to introduce my colleague, Laura, who's going to help us facilitate the Q&A after each showcase. So Laura, welcome. Over to you.
Thanks, Ree. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information. I am thrilled to be joined by our panelists who feel free to jump off mute with your questions, with your comments. If you'd like to introduce yourself very briefly as you do so, you may. So over to the panelists.
Yeah, I can jump in first if nobody else does. Hey, everybody, I'm Joe Flasher. I work at Amazon. I am focused on how we can support external organizations to use our cloud technology, AWS cloud technology, to help in various areas. Mostly I focus on environmental equity, but I also sort of help support other social impact areas as well. So Laura, maybe you can help facilitate this, but yeah, happy, you mentioned AWS specifically. I'm happy to sort of chat later about how we can potentially help you with some of that. So feel free, organizers, to pass along my email. I'm happy to sort of chat about that more. One sort of question, well, I guess there's two questions, both sort of around data. So you mentioned data sets that you want access to. A number of them that you mentioned are already publicly available in a variety of different places. If you're using AWS, a number of them are on AWS already, like Sentinel-1, et cetera. But I'm sort of interested, like, what data set would be most helpful that maybe isn't publicly available yet, right? So I'm sort of interested in that. And then also another question on the data set, you mentioned sort of these household surveys, et cetera. So as part of this project, it seems like you're helping in the collection of a lot of data. And I sort of wondered what was happening to that data, right? Because you should also presumably think of yourselves as not only data users, but data producers. And I could have this wrong, but like it looks like you're a commercial entity based on the name of the of the group and like a .com. And so I wondered, like, as a commercial entity, are you the ones best positioned to own open data sets and stuff, or should it more be sort of owned by a nonprofit or something like that, right? Since as a commercial entity, your sort of interests may change over time and where you're focusing. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing that opportunity about access to AWS. We'll definitely reach out to you afterward. But let me take your questions one by one. So at the moment, we are the kind of data that we need. It depends on the disaster problems that we have in the existing area where we are working. For example, currently we are working in Nepal in a flood-prone community. So any kind of data set that helps to get better digital elevation model is useful. But there is another project where we are doing multi-hazard risk assessment, and there we are considering flood as well as heat wave. So maybe for the heat wave analysis, access to high resolution thermal data sets would be useful. So it really depends on the context of the community where we are working, so that what kind of satellite imageries we require, it depends on the type of hazard that we are solving. First question. The second point is regarding who owns the data set. Yes, you are true. We are a private company. So as a private company, the solution that we are building is we are just building this platform and the container. but the owner are the local government. It's not also the humanitarian agency. They are the local government, and we are partnering with the local government. And the local government and the local youth in these disaster-prone communities, they get mobilized to collect household level data sets. And then the local government has access to the data sets. And it's a multi-purpose data that we are collecting, not just for household level risk assessment, but the same data can be used for development planning, socioeconomic analysis, and other by the local government. When we access the data, most of the time we try to anonymize it so that we do not have access to the personal information. And also after the project is over, all the private confidential data sets are usually deleted so that we do not have access to personal, very sensitive information. That's the another point. And regarding what would be most useful for us at this moment, as I said earlier, DASTAA, it has the capacity to combine multi-source data set. It's drone data, satellite data, sensor data set, and all of those sort of data set. So having access to high computation engine is really, really helpful. We are beginning a project in a week or so in Malawi. And when we work in different countries' context, then having those access really means a lot. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maria Paula, I think we have time for you to share your question, but then we might have to have Uttam answer asynchronously. Go ahead. Oh, for some reason, I don't have Maria's audio. Is that just me? Okay, let's troubleshoot. I'll send you a message and we'll keep it rolling, I think. Thank you so much, team. I think yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And thanks for the great question and kicking us off, Joe. Big round of applause for the team at NAXA. Fantastic job. Our next finalists, Marta, Carla, and the team at the UN's IOM, help prepare communities in the Caribbean needing shelter when hurricanes hit. Let's head back to the Americas, to Panama, to hear about how they're helping improve monitoring and coordination with their pre-evacuation platform. Marta, Carla, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rihanna, and thank you so much, everyone. I will share our presentation. 1 second. Okay. Please confirm that if someone can chat and tell us that
looks great, Marta. You're good to go.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Marta Leboreiro Núñez, and I'm part of the International Organization for Migration, also known as IOM. We are a United Nations agency focused on protecting migrants and displaced communities. In our regional team, I lead work on emergency preparedness across Latin America and the Caribbean, as Rihanna was mentioning, and we are here today as a group of colleagues who believe in the power of real-time data and technology to anticipate risk, strengthen emergency response, and save lives, especially through better evacuations. So we will focus on evacuations now. Our region, Latin America and the Caribbean, is the second most disaster-prone in the world, and 3 out of 3 people have been affected by a disaster, nearly half of them due to floods and storms, and most of them are often predictable between May and November. A well-informed evacuation before a disaster hits can be the difference between safety and a tragedy. And that's why we are here today to share our innovative idea and hopefully a future solution to save lives in this region. The Latin America and the Caribbean pre-evacuation platform, this idea came from ETA, from Irma and Maria in 2020, and then it was confirmed through the hurricanes of ETA and Iota in 2021 to Guatemala and Honduras. Initially, it was just thought as a simply repository of evacuation centers, and it was developed with no funding, only the commitment of IOM staff in the regional office who believe in the potential of this tool. But today we are sharing this idea with all of you. Not as a finished product, but as something we are building and learning from. And we are looking forward to shaping it further with people like all of you who care deeply about preparedness and impact. Now, imagine this. I would like to put you on a situation. You live in a small Caribbean island that is dependent on a larger one nearby. A hurricane is forecasted by the main island, activating the early warning system. But you, yes, please imagine yourself a local authority from the small island, a civil protection authority, don't get the alert until 2 days before the impact, and it's too late. As part of your responsibilities, you urgently need to evacuate the community. As the alert came too late, the main island is already unreachable, and you depend on their guidance. Meanwhile, people are calling your office non-stop, asking for instruction, but you don't have the information you need. You also don't get the answers you need. No data on location, capacity, or condition of the evacuation centers, or even the route to get there. Evacuation is imperative, as the island is expected to be fully impacted. Every second counts, and you are left without the tools to act. This may sound just as another story, right? But it is the reality of many communities in our region. Without timely, accurate information, lives, homes, and livelihoods are normally lost during the hurricane season mainly. And it's not only local authorities making critical decisions. We also have humanitarian responders, disaster agencies, community leaders, and even the private sector that face the same challenge. And we are working to change that by empowering all actors before, during, and after a disaster with the right tools to make informed decisions exactly when they need them. At IUM, we developed this platform to help close that gap. It brings together satellite imagery, forecasting models, and government data to improve actionable information on specifically evacuation centers, location and capacity, coordination mechanisms, and also historical data on past events. It is the first step towards a regional tool that supports preparedness and response for evacuation. During Hurricane Beryl, as you can see now, in mid-2024, we activated a special public section of the platform, succeeding at providing real-time updates on evacuation centers and in the Eastern Caribbean and Jamaica. This was made possible through collaboration with regional disaster management bodies such as SEDIMA and also with OCHA. But now, do you remember that local authority in the Caribbean that it was supposed to be you? With access to this information, even in its early form, as I was mentioning, a repository of evacuation centers, you could have acted sooner. During the preparedness phase, you could have planned the evacuation in advance, assigning people to specific centers and sharing timely information. In the response phase, you could have coordinated efforts more effectively, ensuring that everyone's needs were met and the monitoring of the condition of each of the centers. And finally, in the transition phase, you could have supported a safe return home, informing exit strategies and helping families move forward after the emergency. IOM, we believe, is uniquely positioned to lead this initiative. We are present in over 30 countries across Latin America and the Caribbean, with decades of operational experience in preparedness and humanitarian response. We also have the global and regional mandate to lead the camp coordination and camp management, normally known as CCCM, as a key area for evacuation and planning. And here is the team. Please turn your cameras on if you haven't done already. Right now, 4 of us are partially dedicated to this initiative, mostly voluntarily, and we bring expertise on GIS, preparedness, and main support. So I want to take also a moment to thank Adriana, Carla, and Gabriel for their amazing work during the NASA Lifelines program, but also before, as the initiative has already 5 years. So thank you so much. Also, it's not only IOM. Together with other organizations, we've built strong partnerships, in particular with national and regional disaster agencies. We include, I already mentioned SEDIMA, but we also include SEPREDENAC, where the platform is now a priority for our work plan in 2025-2026. Also, through this program with NASA Lifelines, we've gained the mentorship and access to valuable data sets, exploring, for example, the interoperability with platforms from the Pacific Disaster Center, from UNFPA, UNDRR, or OCHA, for example, through GIS systems to improve the coordination and data sharing and the interoperability. The platform already integrates data from NOAA and also from NASA from hurricane path prediction. That's something that became from the beginning of the idea. And we rely also on private sector, such as Esri for the platform. And we are exploring now how we could use, for example, the Google floods forecast model, which is something new that we are trying to include on the platform. This will help us to deliver faster and more accurate and actionable information across the whole of the region. Also, thanks to the NASA Lifelines program, we have held trigger discussions in Panama City through 2 workshops with humanitarian actors. And this discussion helped us recognize the platform potential and importance of continued investment in preparedness and anticipatory action. They also create a space to discussion on how communities and local actors can save and utilize the platform in real world situations, going just beyond the humanitarian coordination and governmental that was foreseen at the beginning. There is still so much more we can do, and this was already discussed a lot with different partners, but we also want to hear from you. And we would love now to see, to show you why we believe this is important and how we are envisioning it. So I'm going to put a video. It's very short, 1 minute, and then I'll be back with you again.
Disasters can strike at any moment, leaving communities vulnerable and in urgent need of evacuation and emergency support. Through innovation and partnerships, the International Organization for Migration has developed the Latin American and the Caribbean Pre-Evacuation Platform, a tool to significantly advance disaster preparedness and response. Tested during Hurricane Beryl in 2024, this geolocation and real-time platform has already shown a significant impact. It provides critical data for evacuation decision-making, ensuring timely and effective life-saving operations. With further investment, we can enhance this platform to incorporate satellite imagery, population data, a detailed record of historical events and interoperability with early warning systems. We could also enable access for the general public, as well as a separate and more detailed access for humanitarians actors. These enhancements will empower regional bodies, governments, and humanitarian actors to respond swiftly and efficiently. Join us in the mission to improve the Latin American and the Caribbean pre-evacuation platform to save lives and build resilient communities. Your support can make a difference.
And well, what do we mean by providing technology, human resources, data, or funding? Our vision is to create an open, integrated platform that brings together diverse data sources to support evacuation planning. We are seeking for funding to build user-friendly interface with predictive models and dynamic maps using a stronger geospatial and risk data, but also partnerships with organizations that bring complementary technology and data, experts and volunteers with the time and interest to help us scale up the platform and strengthen its data and functionality. We'll measure success by the number of evacuation centers mapped and the speed and accuracy of real-time alerts, for example. We've made solid progress, but there is still a lot to do. We want the Latin American and the Caribbean pre-evacuation platform to support preparedness, coordination during emergencies, and the transition back home. That's why we are inviting you to be part of it. Thank you so much for being here. And now we invite you to join us on this journey and keep the conversation going. We are available for questions, also on the chat if necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marta and IOM team. Over to our panelists. And Maria, I know that you had a question that we didn't get to, so maybe if you have one again this go around, we can start with you, but otherwise just go ahead and jump in. Still no audio for me. We'll figure this out on another go around. Jen, Danielle, Nachika, Joe.
I'm happy to hop on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Dillon. I'm from the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, and we are a global venture philanthropy firm that finds, funds, and supports early stage, high impact social entrepreneurs. So thanks, Maria, for presenting and sharing all of this. My question is, like, what partnerships do you need at the local level to be able to react to improved real-time data on evacuations? And have you started to build out these partnerships?
Yes, thank you so much for your question, Daniele. So we've been already exploring on how we can validate the data in the field, on the ground. That's something that we also believe communities are quite relevant because they can identify areas that are not at risk, etc. Of course, there are already maps on disaster risk reduction, but and the other element that we think is super valuable from local actors and the communities is to understand how they want to be informed and what is the process in which they would like to be informed about evacuations, because sometimes the protocols for that are not clear. So we can raise an alert, but now we need to understand how the community wants to receive that information. It can be Google Alert when you get into the searcher or any other searcher. It can be by SMS. It can be by just going around and yelling, please evacuate. So there are many forms, but we really need to understand how to reach out the community through the technology and the platform we are building. So we think that's one of the main areas that we want to explore in terms of community and local level for now.
Awesome, thanks. Jen, I saw you come on camera. If you have a question, go ahead.
I don't, sorry.
Okay. Joe, you raised your hand earlier. Anything you want to add before we move to the next group?
That was actually an accident. I meant to clap and I raised my hand. This is all very difficult. But I will ask, and I think this is probably a bigger sort of question, so I don't really need an answer now. But I'm interested sort of watching this, especially coming right after the previous presentation. There seem to be some similarities, and I'm interested, like, what can be done once across all of these types of projects, so that you don't need to spend time doing it, and the DASTAA folks don't need to spend time doing it, and the 20 other platforms that look similar don't need to spend time doing this, and what needs to be unique in every case, right? So I do not believe that there's some one magical solution that'll solve everyone's problem, but there's probably a lot of work that you did, that the DASTAA group did as well, and everyone else needs to do. So what can be done once and owned by somebody so that everyone else can move more quickly? But yeah. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. So this came already, and I will give you the first part of the answer, and then Adriana can give you the rest in terms of the technological part. So we already been discussing this with humanitarian actors such as OCHA, the Logistic Cluster, and the WFP, because there are many platforms that are already out there. Right, but we were thinking, what is the best option? To have just one platform with everything, or separate platforms by specialty and expertise? And in all our discussions at the end, we were thinking, like, it's better to understand that maybe we have a place where you can see all the different platforms and understand the use of them, but have them separately, because we need to have them targeted and to the point, and to not be just messy by having a lot of information and complicate them. So we want a simple solution that can answer the needs. And as I was mentioning, if we want to integrate, for example, community level, but also private sector, governments, etc., we will need to be really clear on what we want to do with our platform and what it's focusing on, and also on the simplicity on how are we going to use it and visualize it. So that's something that has came up a lot, and we were thinking, okay, should we merge our platform with the logistic cluster one? And the question the answer at the end, it was like, no, because it has a value of having them separated and also for the target public. However, the work that is behind what you are seeing is the things that we can and we need to be more efficient on. So we don't build again the same GIS layers, etc. So for that, I'm going to pass the word to Adriana. She's our techie person, so she can answer also that part.
I actually might ask Marta and Adriana, if you don't mind, to maybe finish your answer in the chat around some of those pieces. Thank you, appreciate it. And thank you, Marta, for bearing with us through the technical snafu there. Fantastic pitch. We're going to jump to our next team now. So big round of applause for IOM. And please help me welcome our next team joining us from Goma in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Dieudonné and the team at DUSSOFT Engineering have experienced crisis after crisis in their home communities while still innovating to help farmers safely monitor their fields across North Kivu with their Agrisight platform. Dieudonné, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Dieudonné. I'm from Goma, a town in the eastern part of the DRC, where the country conflict, where the rebel group is currently occupying this part of the region. Born in a family of 8, my dad relies on farming to provide provide resources and education to our family. But currently, because of the current situation and conflicts going on, my dad can no longer access the farm, and so does the community due to displacement and both to the workers and also to all the community around us. Just one second. Yeah, so in this region, we've been facing different these conflicts for the past 20 years, and despite humanitarian efforts that have been happening over the years, there seems to be lacking a more modern solution that would track or at least monitor the agricultural insights for both the farmers and to humanitarians in order to allocate the resources where they best needed, they're mostly needed. So in 2024, we carried a survey that showed that 85% of households faced food insecurity, while 3 out of 10 households were found in very severe food insecurity situations. Our data again also indicates a clear correlation between escalating conflicts of agricultural stress with peaks following significant violent event in August 2024. Massive population displacements exacerbate these agricultural disruptions. So the DRC holds a lot of potential with 80 million hectares of arable land, with less than 10% currently exploited. Major crops like cassava, maize, and plantains are vital to food security, but they are under they are threatened under the current situations, and so is the case for many other conflict-affected areas. So this is where Agrisight comes in. So you can think of Agrisight as a watchtower in the sky, where satellites give us images of every field, even in places too dangerous to access or to visit. So we run a health check of crops using the images that we've gotten from different data sets, and then we carry on a fast-track analysis between what we found using the satellites imagery and what's with the ground truth knowledge of the local farmers and the local cooperatives. So this way, we turn these insights into clear maps and phone alerts that guide farmers, cooperatives, and aid workers straight to the problem. So in short, Agrisight turns space images into every advice, helping communities impact their harvest, feed their families, and build their lives. How does it practically work? We follow a 5-step whereby we start by capturing the images, and then we analyze these images using different indicators involving coloring, water levels, moisture, and plant in every image of the plant. And then we start now verifying by adding real life updates from farmers and local partners, making sure that the satellite imagery matches the reality on the ground. Fourthly, we then map and alert, whereby we transform all that information into simple maps for our beneficiaries. Finally, we act where we leverage the knowledge that we found to help farmers adjust their practices, and cooperative coordinate resources, and humanitarian teams reach the right villages faster than time. So in short, we capture, analyze, verify, and map, and then act so that food security gets a fighting chance. We are DUSSOFT Congo, an impact-driven company born in the heart of conflict zones, where we are composed of 25 member teams with different expertises in different areas. But we also are trusted and partner with the ENS, which is the government, the official government regulation agency, and so worked as well with these with Care International and Search for Common Ground to address these challenges in our previous project in terms of digital solutions as well. So to lead this project, we are represented by Dr. Armand, who is a medical doctor by profession and a data analyst with 6 years of experience in monitoring and evaluating humanitarian initiatives, particularly focused on nutrition and food security. And myself, Dieudonné, I'm a software engineer with 6 years of experience in data and software engineering, and currently focusing on the use of geospatial data analysis to make social impact in low-income communities, such as the one I've grown up in. Our beneficiaries, this solution is designed to serve 4 key beneficiaries. Primarily, we target the smallholder farming families returning to regions heavily impacted by the prolonged conflict. And these families urgently need reliable and timely agricultural data to restart their livelihoods effectively. As a second beneficiary, these are agricultural cooperatives, which require accurate insights to enhance decision-making processes and optimize production. And that way, there will be stability in the market prices. Thirdly, we also want to work with humanitarian organizations and local authorities to improve their ability to strategically deploy resources and interventions where they are mostly needed. So, but beyond our technology and development phases, Agrisight is about real impact on real people. Also, our mission is to empower communities and protect livelihoods. Looking ahead, we aim to reach over 10,000 people directly impacted by food insecurity, especially smallholders cooperatives, our primary source of income, since they use this agriculture is their primary source of income. So with Agrisight, no farmer is left invisible, and every hectare of land can be a lifeline, not a liability. To implement this project, we follow a 6-phase strategy, where in the first phase, we conducted a conflict and agricultural research, where the current phase, which is the exploration of different data sets and API integration, we looking at existing data sets and how they can best lead us to our solution. And the upcoming phase will be the multispectral imagery. And fourthly, we'll do now the product development, followed by the land use change monitoring, and carry on with the reporting and recommendations. In terms of investment, we're seeking for a total investment of $180,000, strategically allocated as follows. So this investment will not only enable the evolution of Agrisight, but will also give the ability to deliver timely, data-driven insights that enhance humanitarian interventions and foster lasting agricultural resilience. Thank you for listening to us. We welcome all the questions. And we, in terms of the baseline research of this project, it can be accessed by scanning this QR code. Thank you for listening, and we welcome all the questions that you may have for us.
Fantastic. Thank you for all the work you're doing and everything that you shared. Panelists, what do we have for the DUSSOFT team?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
I enjoyed that presentation. Thank you. And I really enjoyed the beneficiaries. I thought that was a really good way of putting outlining the impact and who will be impacted. So I actually just connected with somebody this week from Wyvern. Do you know Wyvern, the company, imagery company? They are collecting hyperspectral imagery, and they have an open data program. So I would be happy to connect you with them for that part of your project. And then sort of at a more fundamental level, the work that I am shepherding right now is focused on building a global field boundaries data set. And a lot of our motivation comes from smallholder farmers in areas of the world where the farms aren't, rectangular like they are in the US. So would access to farm field boundaries data be beneficial to your program and platform?
And thank you, Jennifer. Definitely, we will need such contacts to like the ones you mentioned, Wyvern, if I got that correctly, to sort of leverage their expertise in making this product to life. So we definitely welcoming such data sets that have real access to the field data, because that's what will bring the change. As we presented, that's the first phase of having access to at least data, field data literally, and all these farms, such that we then carry on all the technical details based on what's already existing as data. So we definitely need such data sets, and looking forward to getting in touch with you regarding the data sets and how they can potentially help us into the development phase.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nachiket.
Hi, my name is Nachiket. I'm the investment manager working with Grand Challenges Canada, and I work with the humanitarian team, and we focus on innovations that serve people affected by conflict. And the question that I have for you, actually, I have two questions. The first question that I have is, have you thought about, since you're a for-profit organization, have you thought about commercializing, and who would be your buyers for this technology? Who is going to pay for getting access to this data or using this data? And the second question that I had, and this may be because of my own naivety, I wanted to understand how conflict is being mapped onto the geospatial data. Because you mentioned DRC and the conflict and how that is affecting the farmers. I also wanted to understand how conflict is being mapped onto your data sets. Oh.
Thank you for the amazing questions. So regarding the business model for this software, because we firstly want to make impact on communities that mostly get impacted by these situations, we do want to we do focus, or at least target first, humanitarians organizations who mostly have a direct contact with different organizations, local or international organizations that would support or will leverage this data in order to properly allocate the resources where they're mostly needed. Therefore, while the impact is mostly, and because this is a common, I would say, mission for both humanitarians and ourselves as a for-profit company, we still want to have some sort of modern tool to properly plan the resources that and the interventions that are targeted to our farmers and our communities around, not only in the DRC, of course, but beyond also the DRC, because conflicts happen in all continents. Hopefully that answers your first question. The second question, how we're using the conflict data. So this is where more partnerships is required for us, like in terms of earth scientists, be it OCHA or other organizations that have daily access to this data, such that we build a custom model. Of course, without forgetting local agricultural cooperatives and the statistics. For instance, since we're partnering already with the National Agency for Statistics, to bring all of us together into bringing in a custom model that would actually map or at least highlight these issues in terms of crop health, and as well as land use and literally land change as well. So this is where the key part is to partner with all the information will be helpful, both locally and existing humanitarian organizations.
Wonderful. I think that's the last question we have time for Dieudonné right now. But if there are other questions, please throw them in the Q&A or the chat, whichever you can find. Big round of applause for DUSSOFT. Fantastic job. Next, I'd love to welcome to our virtual stage Julio and the team at MapBiomas. So we're heading across the Atlantic again, back to Brazil, where we've been working to better prepare cities to deal with evolving threats related to climate change and improved resilience. So Julio, welcome to the floor. Over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you well.
All right, so thank you. I hope you are seeing my screen now and my slides. So thank you for having me today. And I will try to be short. My name is Júlio Pedrasoli, and I'm representing today the MapBiomas project in Brazil. And today I will tell you a very short story on how I believe geospatial data and collective science is having a huge impact on how the global south and tropical cities can fight and adapt and face the climate emergency. So this is my idea today, to introduce what I think about it and how we are dealing with that. So this beautiful picture that you can see is São Sebastião. This is a coastal city in the northern coast of the São Paulo state in Brazil. I know this tropical paradise very well because 10 years ago, my mother used to live nearby in Praia Grande, that is a nearby city on São Sebastião, also in the São Paulo coastline. And I was around these places all the time, visiting São Sebastião and many other cities in the region for work and personal reasons. But one thing that always impressed me is how these beautiful cities are also capable of produce very complex and unique urban situations at the same time. So this is also São Sebastião, as you can see here in this other picture. This is a huge slum called Barra do Saí. It's a specific area inside São Sebastião city. As you can see, it's a very dense, crowded urban type, climbing up the steep slopes of the Serra do Mar mountains. You can see the slums going up. Pressed to climb, not because the poor population living there wants it, but because it's what is left available to them as land to occupy, to live in. So I could say that it's one of the standard urbanization patterns to a huge percentage of the Brazilian population. It's self-built. There's no access to formal housing market. 40% of the Brazilian population, there's no access to formal housing market. And oftentimes it's occupying dangerous landscapes like this. Moving forward to February 2023, there is a historical heavy rain in this specific city, in this specific region, with more than 600 millimeters in less than 24 hours. So you can imagine how much water fell off. So this amount of water fell off over the region, and the results you can see in these planet images. So in the yellow circle here in the slide, you can see this is exactly the Barra do Saí slum. And in the right picture from planet images, you can see the giant scars that were formed after several landslides in that specific event. That extreme event killed 65 people at that time, and 64 of them, that the people are killed, they lived exactly in the Barra do Saí slum. Even though you can see there's landslides everywhere, 99% of the people who died, they were living in the Barra do Saí slum. Unfortunately, the São Sebastião tragedy is just another sad example, not just in Brazil, but it's a sad example. In 2024, at the southern part of Brazil, the Rio Grande do Sul state, the mega floods hit about 450 cities, killing more than 160 people at that time, destroying houses, urban infrastructure, but also damaging extensive, important agricultural areas for the region and for entire Brazil. The cities, of course, are not prepared for an event of that magnitude, but the evidence shows that that event will occur at a higher frequency and it will occur very soon. Besides that, the socioeconomic data from the families in that region, that specifically the families that were hit by the floods, shows that 47% of the low-income families that were hit by the floods lost their houses. And when you look into the high-income families that were hit by the floods, only 13% of the families report some kind of loss. So the burden, it's also unevenly distributed within cities. In Brazil, is just another example. So informality is a key characteristic in the Global South cities. And the estimate is that nowadays you have 1 billion people living in some kind of informal urban setting. And by 2030, we expect to have 2 billion city inhabitants that will be living in hazard-prone areas, most of them in the secondary cities, Global South, and in very crowded areas like slums. So using MapBiomas data, we, for example, could estimate that in Brazil in 2023, 3% of the total Brazilian urbanized area is occupying some kind of risk area. But when you look into just into the slums in Brazil, this height is much higher. It goes up to 18% of the slums, urbanized area slums, occupying some risk area in Brazil. So the problem is clear. Brazil is just a proxy here, and we can extend the patterns and stories to many other global south tropical cities across the globe, of course. But for Brazil, let's put it in numbers. So 47% of the 5,500 Brazilian cities, they don't have a master plan. So almost half of the Brazilian cities, they don't have any kind of master plan. For those who have, just 28% address some kind of flooding events on their documents, and just 13% they are addressing some kind of landslide and other events planning in their documents. But between 2013 and 2023, 94% of the Brazilian municipalities, the Brazilian cities, reported some climate disaster-related event. So there's a gap. There's a planning gap, and ultimately, this gap is connected to a data gap and a local capacity gap to deal with that. So this is the main problem that I'm facing. By having data open, accurate, and accessible, the government, society, and virtually anyone can use it to support an informed decision. This is the key. So this image here that you can see shows one of the cities flooded in 2024 in the southern region of Brazil. The urban patches from blue to red are MapBiomas urban areas that we map over time, this sprawl, that we categorize it by vertical proximity of the water bodies, and the black polygons are the households that were affected by the floods. So as we notice, more than 80% of the polygons overlap the MapBiomas red classes, indicating the confidence of flood-prone areas identification in our data. So we knew it beforehand. So it's clear that using geospatial data, we can understand risk before tragedy happens and plan for them. So here is where MapBiomas kicks in. So we produce open and accessible land use and land cover data, including, of course, beyond other 32 land use land cover classes, we include the urbanized areas and its dynamics over time from 85 to the most recent year in our collections. So we rely on this geospatial data, specifically, especially in Landsat and Sentinel-2 time series. We process all the images year by year. We create the annual maps pixel by pixel. And our technical approach is based on machine learning and cloud computing, which allows us to work in a distributed kind of hyper-local manner because the maps are produced locally and then we combine them in the integration phase, right? By integrating all the maps and updating them frequently, we can tell the history of every pixel in the territories that we are mapping, including Brazil. So all urban pixels also have their own history, and we can use it in the decision-making process. So because we understand the importance of comprehend the complexity of urbanized areas, we put together this first version of what we are calling MapBiomas Urban Data Platform, where we can openly provide not only the MapBiomas Urban Dynamics data for all Brazilian cities, but actually combine it with several other data sets and models, such as the vertical proximity to water bodies and its evolution over time, the officially mapped urban risk areas from national and local sources, urbanized areas classified by slope gradient as an indicator of landslide susceptibility, for example, including its evolution over time, and also including all the officially mapped Brazilian slums, inter-urban vegetation that we can detect from very high resolution satellite images and combine with Landsat, and urban transitions over time. So, and this has been our strategy to create impact. We seed the data to a community of users in diverse sectors who can actually apply it on the strategic planning and generate the impact by themselves at different scales. So we have the projects, we have a community of users that it's leading to the users to create the impact, not MapBiomas itself. We are producing the data that can be used to create the impact. So for you to understand, here are some examples of how MapBiomas data has been used in the last 2 years. So at the government level, for example, the Brazilian National Housing Plan that we call PLANAB is incorporating this land dynamics that we mapped in its interconnection with hazard-prone areas are supporting data set to produce the National Housing Plan. Also, the Brazilian Environment and Climate Change Ministry, it's using the MapBiomas Urban Data Platform already to promote through the Adapt Cities program, the construction of local adaptation plans supported by the federal level. So we have 50 cities already selected by the federal government that will be using these in this test phase, the first stage phase. So at the local level, for example, 7 cities that I know of, probably there's much more that I don't even know, already used MapBiomas data, MapBiomas urban data as one of the sources to produce their own climate change adaptation plans. So if you sum up all the population in just in these 7 cities, we are talking about 80 million people that can be beneficiary of these plans at the end. So just for you to understand. Of course, we're trying to impact beyond that. So for example, in NGO sector, the third sector, last year, the Alana Institute, that is an NGO that work in educational things, used MapBiomas data and our data, and they were able to file a complaint being in the Rio de Janeiro Public Prosecutor's Office because of the location of schools related to risky areas. Another example, another NGO using MapBiomas data in Brazil, we helped them to identify more than 600 schools in São Paulo city that could receive mini forests just by looking at the MapBiomas data. So what's the magic behind MapBiomas? The data already exists. We're just taking satellite image and using it to create maps. The key is the way we organize the maps and produce them using the same methodology, but locally with local teams. So people from the place produce their maps. And we are already present in 14 countries, and we can easily transfer this knowledge. And we are expanding, focusing now on India and African countries next year. But the plan is to be present in 70% of the tropical countries by 2030. So we have this established network of partners that it can make it happen. And we have a clear vision of how we can make it happen. And because of that, we are attracting a lot of partners and also financial partners and technical partners to help us. And our efforts have been recognized as by the SCO and TED Audacious Awards last year. So just for you to understand. So our impact depends on building local capacity. So based on the Brazilian experience of map production for the urban area specifically, we estimate that expanded to India and some African countries by 2030, we just need 300K USD to put it to work from now to 2030 for these next countries. So in MapBiomas, we truly believe that the future is collective and that the urban data platform will have a big potential to impact the climate, our urban planning in the tropical cities. The team in MapBiomas, there is more than 400 people, so I cannot name them, just some of my colleagues, but I appreciate the help of all of them. Thank you.
Awesome. Congratulations. Fantastic work, Julio. Over to you, panelists. Any questions about data use, interventions, connections with some of the other groups? I know we've seen a through line here so far.
I can jump in if there's no other questions. Thank you. It's super awesome. On the new country expansion, you sort of gave a dollar figure there, but I'm interested, like, what, besides the dollar amount, like, what is a good country to expand into? What are you looking for when you think of expanding into a country? What are your blockers? Like, I'm sort of just interested in, like, do you actually put people in the country, or is this just people sitting in Brazil doing things for that country? Like, how do you, what's this model?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Actually, I'm not making maps for other countries. I'm just making maps for Brazil, and the maps for Bolivia, Venezuela, and probably the Democratic Republic of Congo, they need to be done by the local teams. This is the way we process. We need to transfer knowledge. So the choice to which country we are going depends on several factors. So we need to have connections there. We need to engage people to establish the platform there. We need to guarantee there's some kind of money going there to keep it running. So, for example, why I'm talking about India and specifically Democratic Republic of Congo, because when MapBiomas was born, the main thing about it was the map, land use and cover changing, and how the forests are changing. So Congo is a kind of a natural place to go to look into the rainforest down there. But also at the same time, the African cities, they are in a very different place in terms of urbanization right now. And I mean, the pace of urbanization is different from Latin America. It's a very special place to look at and the access to data. So actually, we need to put people on the ground to work on the maps. We are together, but we're not made to map the maps for them. We are just helping them with the kickstart. And then the idea is that this nucleus it's self-controlled and it can replicate to other places. I don't even need to be there anymore.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Maria, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yay. Sorry for all the glitches. I changed my earphones. So hi everyone, I'm from Mercico Ventures. We are a family of funds, and we invest and provide grants for solutions for climate resilience in emerging countries. So very excited to hear all of these. Julio, I'm very interested in what you were saying and showing. One of the questions that I just thought of as you responded, the last question was about the sustainability of it. So I'm wondering how it's currently working. You said you gave like the money amount to expand, but I'm guessing that's to build like the initial functionality. But for Brazil or other countries you're already in, how is this currently being sustained and updated?
All right, thank you for the question. From a financial standpoint, we have a set of funders that it's keeps us running. So Brazil is the main hub now that keeps the funding flowing. Other countries, specifically in South America, they are kind of doing their own thing now. They can access their own funds, and this is the main idea. But for, now, most of the money comes through Brazil, and then you use it in different ways. So there's no specific money to map forests or no specific money to map slums. This is not how it works. We have the money, and then we take the decisions inside and how we're going to use this money in different sectors. So the money is used basically for training, basically for infrastructure. So the websites need to run, the data sets need to be processed. There's a lot of people working in the media. We also have a huge presence in media, specifically in Brazil. So there's more than 500 people working in MapBiomas right now at different levels. So some of them are working full-time. Some of them, like me, I'm a professor. I'm just working not a full-time, but I have no money in my hands, but some people need to be paid for this. So now Brazil is the hub, and we are kind of trying to shift this, and this is the process. It takes time to make a country to be sustainable by its own in terms of financial security for the project.
Well said, Julio, and I think we'll have to end there, but keep your questions coming if you have them for the MapBiomas team. Throw them in the Q&A, throw them in the chat. Big round of applause, fantastic pitch. Now, next, we're heading over to the Center for Geospatial Analytics at North Carolina State University, where they're developing the state-of-the-art flood maps for communities who are looking to protect themselves and build resilience to hydromet hazards. So Mirella, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Can you see my slides and can you hear me well?
We sure can.
Okay, fantastic. So hello everyone. Thank you for being here and supporting our work today. My name is Mirella Tulbure and I'm a professor in geospatial analytics at North Carolina State University, where I lead the Geospatial Analysis for Environmental Change Lab. We're a group of scientists who for the past 10 years have been using time series of satellite data and AI and machine learning algorithms to develop historical and near real-time flood maps to help with disaster preparedness and quantify flood damage. And I would like to start today by asking you to take a minute to think back to one of the most important moments in your life, the moment when you were ready to make your first home purchase. You've obviously done your research, you saved up for a number of years, and let's say you move from out of state and you decide on a small rural community in Georgia. And the big day comes, you move in, and the first time it rains, your property gets flooded. And this doesn't just happen once or twice, it happens every single time it rains. There was no way of you knowing that your property might get flooded because this particular state, as well as many other US states, have what we call a non-disclosure law when it comes to flooding. So nobody had to tell you that your property had flooded in the past and therefore might as well get flooded in the future. So what do you do? What Ms. Jackie Jones did, together with her predominantly African-American community, was to team up with my lab through American Geophysical Union's Thriving Earth Exchange, and we worked together for about a year to co-create flood maps, and those flood maps were useful to the community not only to validate their lived experiences, but also to decide where to place green infrastructure to mitigate the effects of those flood events. Now, this is just a heartbreaking example of a rural community in Georgia, but flooding impacts communities around the world. In fact, nearly 1.5 billion people are impacted by an increased risk of flooding, or nearly 20% of the global population. And we also know that overburdened communities are disproportionately impacted by the impacts of floods. In the US alone, we know that about 2/3 of all declared natural disasters involve a flooding event. And the main impacts of those flood events include loss of life, disease outbreaks, damage to homes and other built infrastructure, and of course, crop damage, which can lead to food insecurity. Just the past year, 2024, was the warmest year on record, and we've seen big flood events across 4 continents and many countries, including floods in Vietnam, Nigeria, Eastern and Central Europe, as well as in Valencia, Spain. And of course, we also know of the impacts of hurricanes Milton and Helene in the southeastern United States. The good news is that satellite data can help by helping us derive flood extent maps. And the reason why satellite data are really critical is because they provide equitable coverage and therefore flood extent analysis. They help with emergency managers and city planners and residents recover and prepare for future floods. Flood extent maps also help us quantify flood damage. For example, how many people have been impacted, what roads are being impacted, what's the amount of cropped area that's being impacted by a certain flood event. And of course, historical flood maps help us understand which areas have been flooded in the past and therefore are more likely to flood in the future. However, despite the fact that satellite data provide systematically consistent and equitable coverage, there are still certain challenges associated with mapping floods when using satellite data. And some of these challenges have been addressed in my lab by combining complementary resolution, multiple sensors, to help us address some of these challenges. These challenges include things such as certain flood events are short-lived. So the more sensors you have to use, the more likely you are that you will pick up a certain flood event. We also know that floods have what we would call spectral variable spectral signatures. In other words, no two floods look alike. And therefore, when you try to develop global model based on machine learning, you want to make sure that you have representative training data so that your algorithm can generalize across global areas or at least large areas. And we also know that optical satellite data, which is one of the main data sources that have been used so far in flood mapping, is typically obscured by clouds and canopy cover. So together with my lab, we have been using time series of satellite data. On the left-hand side is an animation showing you an example of using Landsat sensors for over 2 decades in Australia's Murray-Darling Basin, one of the largest dryland basins in the world, about the size of the US Four Corners states. And what you can see here is not only that we can quantify the spatial and temporal distribution of flooding events, but also critically, we are able to produce these seasonal flood maps per year over 2 decades, which looks like a stack of pancakes, which we can then combine to give us a flood history for that particular area. And this is also important for applications that require time series approaches. However, given the 30-meter resolution of the Landsat data and the overpass frequency of 8 to 16 days, we are likely to miss those types of short-lived flood events. So in more recent work, we collaborated with colleagues at NASA Goddard, and we were one of the first adopters of their new harmonized Landsat Sentinel-2 dataset, which incorporated 3 sensors. And what you can see here on the right-hand side picture is the combined 3 sensors on the right-hand side, and you can see that we can pick up more ephemeral short-lived flood events compared to 2 sensors, which you can see in the middle, or 1 sensor, which you can see on the left-hand side column of data. We also wanted to see how is the 30-meter resolution data being able to capture certain small flood events. And so we compared the 30-meter resolution data with commercial 3-meter planescope data, and we showed that the higher the resolution, the more likely we are to pick smaller flood events. So motivated by these 2 critical findings that both the temporal resolution as well as the spatial resolution are really important when mapping flood events, in current work in one large project that is currently funded by NASA that I'm leading, we're focusing on 5 years of global flood events, shown here in the red rectangle. And we are using coincident complementary resolution sensors, a 10-meter resolution, including cloud-penetrating all-weather radar, Sentinel-1, and optical Sentinel-2 data for flood mapping. And we are using several machine learning and AI algorithms, including traditional random forest and XGBoost algorithms, a conventional or established deep learning algorithm, such as a UNEP, as well as more recently foundation models. So this is just an example of using random forest for mapping global flood events. This is just an example in 2022 of a massive flood event that happened in Pakistan. And I'm zooming into the area highlighted. This is what the flood event looks like in optical data, in radar data. And this is our mapped flood event with a random forest approach. This is a UNEP example, an established deep learning algorithm of a flood event in central Greece in 2018. And as I said, more recently, we started using foundation models. Foundation models are self-supervised learning models that have been trained on terabytes of data. They are typically developed by NASA or ESA and IBM. And even though we currently have more than 50 geospatial foundation models, we have not seen the science of task-specific applications pay off. And this is primarily because of a lack of existing representative labeled data sets. So in my lab, we developed a new data set called FloodsNet, which harmonizes both Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 data for 85 global flood events. And we started applying a recent foundation model using this data set. And some of the early results are shown here, and they are promising. So a couple of key takeaways so far. We know that leveraging machine learning and AI algorithms applied to time series of satellite data is critical because they give us systematically consistent and equitable global flood mapping abilities. It is critical to integrate complementary resolution of satellite data. It is also important to look back in time, so use older sensors such as Landsat to give us historical flood maps. And of course, foundation models have the potential to lower compute and data needs for training to produce accurate flood maps. Here are a couple of the testimonials that we have received for this work, including one from Miss Jackie Jones, who was the community partner that we have been working with in rural Georgia. So what is my ask for you for today? My ask is sixfold. We have certain data needs. We would love to have access to quota-free 10-meter Sentinel-1 RTC data from Alaska SAR. We have several computing needs. We do most of our work in AWS, so we would love to have more access to AWS storage and computing resources, and also not only to be able to produce those flood maps, but to integrate those with asset layers such as roads, buildings, and population. We still have R&D needs. So we've developed this pipeline based on publicly available satellite data, but we would love to expand this pipeline to commercial data sets such as PlanetScope or radar data such as ICEYE and Capella. And we would love to team up with NASA Harvest to quantify the impact of floods on crops. And we started working with the GLAD team at the University of Maryland in DC, who are mapping crops globally and operationally. So we put together the two types of maps. We also have people needs. So we would love to fund a data engineer to help us operationalize this pipeline. And of course, ways to reach out to various stakeholders. And from all of you today, really, I'm keen to hear any input on how to make this pipeline operational, advice on the best scaling strategy, and how to best target specific stakeholders. So this is the last slide of our vision. We believe we can develop high-resolution, accurate flood extent maps in different flooding situations. So we can capture riverine, coastal, as well as pluvial or rainfall-driven flooding, which can help understand the immediate impacts of flooding events. We've shown how we can work with community groups to co-create flood maps, and we believe that this is a powerful tool to help civil society and community groups understand what they're experiencing when it comes to flooding and when looking to become more resilient in the face of climate change. We envision a dual-tier pricing whereby community-level users might be subsidized by potential other users such as insurance companies. And this is it from me. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Fantastic job, Mirela. Great work walking us through a lot of technical detail without losing the audience. All righty. I'll turn it over to a panelist with a question.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe.
If nobody else is going, I'll go again. Sorry. Yeah, please, Marilla, that was awesome. You can get my contact info from the organizers and happy to chat more. I'm from Amazon again, so it's a reminder. It's like Beetlejuice. If you just say my name, like, I'll tell you to contact me. One other thing, I'll drop a link to it here in the chat, but in case it's helpful, there's a effort for greater geospatial usage over the African continent called Digital Earth Africa. They have a product called Water Observations from Space. So it's basically already doing some of the, is it water, is it not, on a pixel level that might be useful for your work for a variety of reasons. It's only the African continent only. It's quite a large continent, and it's Landsat, so you get that resolution, but it does have the 40-year archive. So lots of data, but maybe not as high resolution. But I'll share the link for that in case that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And yeah, I'm aware of Digital Earth Africa, and that's an excellent product. I would want to add, besides the resolution, so they map water at the Landsat level. We're using 10-meter resolution data. They are primarily focused on water, and I guess I was trying to make the point that flooding is slightly different than water. So flooding has very different spectral signatures in satellite data. And unless you have representative training, you're not going to be able to map most of the flood events. You might be lucky and get some flood events, but flooding really looks different than river water or deep, dark blue reservoirs, for example. And they have not used flooding in their training of their models. So obviously, they're not meant to map flooding.
Sure, makes sense.
Thank you.
Make sure that you two are in touch. Danielle.
Great, thanks. We have time for another question. Thanks, Marilla, for sharing all of this. I think, yeah, I'm excited about what you're building because there's so much possibility and direction that you could take this. But I think where my mind is right now, are you still working through building out this proof of concept or like figuring out product market fit? And the reason why I ask is like there's such a broad geographic focus. I think even in your presentation that this could be useful everywhere, but sometimes when you're building for everyone and everywhere, it's not as like useful and targeted. And so I'm thinking through like who would pay for this, who's going to maintain it, who's going to use it going forward. And then I think it's actually brilliant that you even shared like a very concrete problem that you even shared was that a lot of states in the US don't have, I think you mentioned like flood disclosure laws. And I think that becomes a real issue to like property prices, and that's like a huge need. And so, yeah, my question is like you could go really deep and focus on that problem and building all this evidence and then going through to like policymakers at the state level and changing this. And like if you could get that fixed for a lot of people, like that's a really useful case that your data could change and directly change lives. Versus are you still figuring out and like building out that proof of concept and all the cool things that you could do with this? Like where are you on that journey?
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. These are all excellent points. So where we are in this journey is we've developed various machine learning and AI algorithms for various sensors, so both Landsat as well as Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2. We have models that we can apply globally. So they're based on global training data, and they could be applied to the US or to any other flood event in the world. So whenever somebody asks us, do you have flood maps for Poland? Do you have flood maps for Helene? We can say, we can make them, right? So the idea of, so we have these models, right? And they live in AWS. And what we're trying to do now is take this to the operational stage. So basically, we want to be able to go, like if somebody, for example, there was a request that came to us that said, we want to put the recent 2024 NAXA flood that happened in Poland in the broader context of floods that happen in Poland historically. Can you give us maps by the day after tomorrow? And that's what we want to be able to do, right? Like we want to be able to jump to any request. And in terms of stakeholders, I can see this, like I view my role as providing accurate flood maps and applying these global models. Now, the models might not be perfect for every single flood event, and that's okay because we look at the maps, we assess the accuracy, and we can always add more training data for that particular flood event or that particular region and improve the models depending on the user's needs. So we view this as very flexible when it comes to stakeholder engagement once we have this operational. And I feel like we've done so much work to develop these models that now is like, this is the last step, right? This is just making it operational and being able to connect with users. But I have not connected with users as such in a very formal way. There are various people that come to me because they've heard of our work and they go like, can you give me flood maps for Helene, for example? And then we make some maps and they give them those maps. But I would like to formalize this process to inform various user categories that we can provide these flood maps for any flood event that you might want, and we can provide historic flood maps as well as near real-time flood maps, so we can be flexible.
Thanks, Mirella. And Jen, I see you've got your hand up. Unfortunately, we've got to jump to the next one, but if you want, throw it in the chat and hopefully Mirella will catch you there. Maria, I see your comment as well. So keep it going. Don't mean to stop the discussion by any means, but we're ready for our next pitch. So we're going to head back across the ocean to a group who are trying to better understand issues stemming from displacement in humanitarian crises. So let's welcome Pratik and Antoine, representing a partnership between Nepal Flying Labs and Terre d'Homme Foundation, and they're sharing their platform Usafiri. So over to you, team.
Okay, hello, namaste everyone from Switzerland and Nepal. My name is Antoine Lavanchy and I represent the Swiss-based Terre d'Homme Foundation, a leading child's rights organization with over 60 years of field experience. Alongside my colleague Pratik from Nepal Flying Labs, we are here to present our innovative solution with the potential to solve the crisis challenge. Because the story we want to tell today is when disaster strikes, whether it is flood, landslides, or conflict, people will get to displace and forced to migrate. But the systems that are supposed to protect them rarely follow. So we are asking ourselves with Pratik, how can we better predict and simulate what's coming? Understand who is the most at risk and act before lives are lost and families are displaced. So that's the story behind Usafiri. So let's look at the scale of the crisis. Let's start with the big picture. So every year, tens of millions of people get displaced. At the end of 2024 alone, the world saw 83.4 million people displaced globally. 73.5 million of them were displaced due to conflict and violence, and nearly 10 million were forced to flee by disaster, floods, droughts, and landslides. But these numbers, what is important to keep in mind, are not telling the full story. When people get displaced, it is also important to understand that they often lose access to schools, to protection, clinics, food, and so on and so forth. And because displacement isn't always tracked or planned, people disappear from the data and from decision making.
Okay, let me take you to the two places where we have seen this close in reality. The first in Nepal. Back in 2024 September, massive landslide hit Sindupalchok district. Over 12,500 people were affected, 219 lives lost, and entire community displaced. And this is a district already known for its fragility after the 2015 earthquake. And let's move to Kenya. In 2024, the population of the Dadaab refugee complex exceeded 300,000. Fueled by prolonged insecurity in Somalia and intensifying drought crisis across Africa. Kenya also faced widespread flooding affecting 43 of its 47 counties. Over 219,000 people were displaced and hundreds of schools and health clinics were left unusable. In both places, data was late, coordination was weak, and local responders overwhelmed.
So what is the problem? Here is the challenge. We have early warning system, but we don't have no early understanding. We get alerts when disaster or conflict is coming, but we don't know how the disaster or conflict will evolve, where people should and will go, and whether infrastructure will hold or essential services will be sufficient. So government and humanitarian organizations like us, Terre d'Homme, we are most of the time flying blind. And because we don't have the tools, to simulate disaster, conflict, and displacement that assess impact on infrastructure and services or prioritize protection for those most at risk, especially in our case, children and a vulnerable population. And that's exactly why we developed Usafiri with Pratik.
So Usafiri is not just a map or a visualization tool. It is a participatory-based GIS platform that simulates disaster, forecasts population movement, and analyzes service pressure. It helps responders in various ways, such as simulate flood, landslide, or conflict hotspots, predict how many people will be displaced and where they will move, map essential services such as clinics, schools, and shelters. Similarly, analyze whether services can meet increased demands or not. And lastly, visualize everything through an intuitive dashboard that prioritizes child protection, women security, and community involvement. It is powered by high-resolution satellite imagery, locally available datasets, and AI-based models. And it is designed to be used by different kind of stakeholders, mayors, responders, and frontline workers, and not just experts. So in Usafiri, we have tested key modules such as participatory mapping, data integration, spatial analysis, and risk visualization in Nepal. This was developed in first phase piloting. So similar communities actively mapped our clinic, health institutions, roads, and local risks using participatory mapping approach and open source tool to support humanitarian efforts in first pilot phase. Now we want to bring it to the next level with your help. Usafiri will scale and includes real-time displacement simulation, AI-powered forecasting and prediction, and service response planning linked to real-time datasets. It is no longer just a database platform. It becomes a decision-making engine. So how Usafiri works? So let's bring this to life with our two real-world examples in Nepal and in Kenya. So in Nepal, we start getting early warning in our Usafiri through the integration of API from Bipod portal, which is our disaster portal. But we go beyond that. Usafiri will integrate high-resolution imagery and locally available dataset to map out highly exposed zones, and then we will simulate how people may move in that scenario. For instance, from villages in Sindupalchok after a landslide or flood or earthquakes, and we will identify where the pressure will build. Over to you, Antoine.
Yes, so in Kenya, we use more or less the same system, at the difference that we add another layer, conflict. So using different sources and data set, we track violence, war, drought-driven movements, like those from Garissa into Dadaab camps where we operate. And this intelligence is shared via real-time dashboards with local authorities and responders, so they can act before services are overwhelmed.
So let's now look at the concrete impact Usafiri could have, starting with Nepal. So in Nepal, we are targeting 4 high-risk districts in terms of disasters. So Sindupalchok, Dolakha, Tarding, and Kanchanpur, covering 1.2 million people and over 150,000 potential displacement annually.
Similarly, in Kenya, we tend to cover 1.5 million people living in disaster and conflict-prone zones. That includes modeling displacement scenario over 300K people in camps and host communities. Globally, Usafiri can be scaled to more countries, similar countries, including Bangladesh, Nigeria, and the Philippines, to name a few. But now let's talk about who we are. Usafiri, just for you to know, started as a pilot with the EPFL, so the Engineering Federal School of Lausanne in Switzerland, with the Tech for Dev grant. And with partnership among World Bicycle Relief and Nepal Flying Labs, helping map infrastructure gap in Nepal through participatory methods. Now, today, together, Terre des Hommes and Nepal Flying Labs, we want to scale the solution. So TDH brings field presence, child protection, displacement, and migration expertise in more than 30 countries. Nepal Flying Labs bring GIS, drone mapping, and anticipatory action experience. So now we are looking for funders, tech allies, and humanitarian partners to join us in this journey. We have applied already to various grants from the Airbus Foundation, the World Food Programme, or the Global Resilience Partnership. And we have been already selected, like in the NASA Lifeline program, but we are still looking for additional partners. Together, we believe that we can take Usafiri to the next level and better protect those vulnerable populations most at risk and on the move.
So what brings Usafiri unique? So there are different kind of solutions existing, such as UNHR list or DRC ahead. But Usafiri is unique in its own because it combines hazard displacement simulation, movement forecasting, and service analysis. So it is not just a participatory, it is a participatory one, not just top-down approach. So, and it is centered on the needs and protection of children, youths, and women.
So what is our ask? So to scale Usafiri, we are seeking support in 3 key areas. So the first thing is we need data sets. We need to have access to high resolution satellite imagery and population movement data set to power forecasting and simulation. We need also tech platforms, so cloud hosting, AI modeling tools, integration of geospatial and humanitarian platform to scale up. And finally, we have already secured 225K to develop the first version of Usafiri, but we need up to $500,000 US dollars to complete the solution and pilot it. So we are looking for partners to close the gap. If you can support it with data, technology, expertise also on AI or funding, we are ready to collaborate and continue the discussion together in this journey.
So as we wrap up, we leave you with one clear message. Like every $1 invested in early warning saves $9 in response. And with anticipatory action, we can reduce costs up to 40%. With Usafiri, we are building a faster, smarter, and more protective humanitarian system designed by local actors and stakeholders for meaningful local impact. We are ready to scale, and we invite you to scan the QRs to connect with us at Terrace Days Homes and Nepal Flying Lab. So thank you for listening and us.
Amazing. Good work. Nice round of applause in the virtual claps. You'll notice that we are down one panelist. He will be getting all of this and will be sharing questions and comments async afterwards. But we're still with our brilliant team here, Jan, Maria, Daniela, and Nachiket. Would someone like to brave the first unmute, the first question for the team?
I can go.
Go ahead.
So my question to you all is, this is a great platform and thank you so much for this presentation. My only question is, there are plenty of other such platforms and the major problem lies in getting the right stakeholders onto a single platform, and how, so that's my major concern. How do you get all the right stakeholders onto a single platform so that there's coordination and all of them work together towards solving that problem? I know it's a tough problem, and you may not have the right answer right now. But yeah, just putting it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the tricky question. I think what we want to do is first is to build this platform, or to continue to build this platform with local partners. So we have strong ties with the government in Nepal, in Kenya. We want also, and that's why we participated in the NASA Lifelines, we want also to develop that with other organizations. And I saw today a lot of similarities. And then we want to build that with the population. And the idea was really to focus that on displacement, migration, and especially for a vulnerable population. So that's the kind of discussion we are now having at the local level in Nepal, in Kenya, and the idea is to continue like this at the global level. I don't know if Pratik, you want to add on that?
So yeah, I want to add up something like we are Nepal Flying Lab and we have a network of more than 40 flying lab globally. So we will explore our partners in more than 40 countries to connect with the local partners, which would minimize the gap that our sir has just raised up the question. So with our partner and your support with the local coordination, we will try to engage all the stakeholders and local leaders to engage in this scaling solution. Yeah, that's from my side.
Thanks, Nachiket. Great question about community engagement. Jen, Danielle, or Maria?
To say this applies for this team, but others, I'll just put the link on the chat in a bit. But we at Mercy Corps Ventures, we have different labs. I come from the Climate Venture Lab, but we also have a humanitarian lab. And we recently, it's closed now, but we run them about twice a year. Calls for proposals for solutions similar to this one that have like anticipatory action. So I'll share that. I think that's a good fit for this team and others that have gone through. I'll just share the link. So no question, just a small comment.
Great, that's a fantastic opportunity. Please do drop that in the chat. We have time for maybe one more question, Jen or Danielle, if you have anything you'd like to ask or any comments.
Jump in with a quick one. It follows the question that had been asked previously, but how are you balancing, or do you have a preference for depth in like in Kenya and Nepal, so going across many sectors, but in one country, versus breadth, and that means expanding to many countries? And I think you mentioned that Nepal Flying Labs has partnerships in 40, but do you have a strong sense on where you would prefer to build, either that breadth or depth?
But maybe I can jump to this question, and Pratik, you can go. But the first, maybe something that we didn't tell in our pitch is that we just met in another event with Pratik and Nepal Flying Labs, and we just found out that we were working more or less on the same initiatives, and that's why we decided to collaborate on that. So the first thing, TADESM was looking to develop something like that, so for our country of intervention. So there are already our countries. And we choose Nepal because of the disaster issue there, and also Kenya because the nexus also with conflict was really important for us. And then, of course, as Pratik was saying, they have a global network. The same with us, with other organizations. So that's how we see the scaling of the solution. So first, the idea was to test in the country of intervention of TADESM, and with successful piloting, then we could extend in other countries. So we name a few, but it's just the similar kind of countries that have the same issues as in Nepal and Kenya.
I think that's my opportunity to jump in and usher us to our next pitch. So everybody give a big round of applause to Pratik and Antoine. Thank you so much for sharing Usafiri. And next, we're actually going back over to Brazil to hear from our next finalist, Guilherme, who's been developing sophisticated methods for the UN Environment Program using satellite data to better understand what's needed after a crisis hits to help returning communities safely return and rebuild. So Guilherme, over to you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I hope you all can hear me fine. Let me just get my slides up. Let me know if this doesn't work. So thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for having me. My name is Guilherme Ablanowski. I'm a geospatial data specialist with the UN SCSN. And for over 8 years, I've been consulting with the UN Environment Program, where I develop models for quantifying and modeling the management of debris from disasters or conflicts. So to give you a little bit of context there, since the turn of the century, the world has experienced over 8,000 natural disasters and more than 50 active conflicts. And in many of these, entire cities will be reduced to rubble and streets will be left with debris and bodies and toxic materials. And this is not, very much in everyone's minds when we think of disasters and conflicts. But before we can, build back better, we need to think of how we handle the clearance. How do we clean up these cities? And this is often not seen in the extent that it's actually will take in terms of time and resources needed. So this is what UNEP comes in with the disaster and conflict branch. The team helps countries quantify, manage debris that comes from those situations, and this is essential for rebuilding those cities as sustainably and as efficiently as possible. So what this work does is it prevents debris from being disposed in an uncontrolled manner, and this is very common, but it also facilitates humanitarian work, reduces costs and environmental impact by reducing the transport distances that separate the debris that was generated from the recycling or disposal facilities. So without this work, this is what we would normally get. We would get a situation where a country would only ask for help from humanitarian organizations and just ask for, can you give us more trucks? And that doesn't really begin to solve the issue because the distances are so big and the quantities are so large that you just go from like 10 years to maybe 9 years in terms of cleaning time. So how do we do this modeling? So we start by taking pre-crisis building footprints. This can come from OSM, Bang, Google, EOC, and then we enrich those building footprints with height information. This can come from either Sentinel-1, so SAR data, or the GHSL built H product. And we will join that with products that UNOSAT produces. They take very high resolution optical imagery, and they either automatically or manually add damage information to each of those buildings. So they produce those damage assessments that we then use and we combine with our 3D building data sets. And we will, from that, take the input from experts in debris and how they are, created to get to a building stock volume and mass data set that is then used through network analysis to calculate, okay, so what's the distance from this particular amount of debris to a recycling site or a disposal site, and where could we place those sites in order to reduce costs and resources that are used for the cleaning operation. So to give you an example of where the team has done that in the past, when in 2017 we were having the conflict in Iraq, right after the conflict ended, the team produced debris assessments and a recycling pilot project was put in place. So we modeled where the best place for a recycling project would be, and we used optical and radar imagery to try to assess and quantify and, more importantly, localize where debris was created in the city. And with that, we were able to showcase, to even show the path for a 25% reduction in cost, which means $10 million in this case, a 50% reduction in time, which is 4 years, and a 50% reduction in disposed materials. So 3.5 million tons that are not going to a disposal site, a dump site, and that are being reused for reconstruction in the same place where it has been generated. So this very often will take the shape of scenarios that take into account the time to clear, the material disposed, the total clearing cost, total fuel consumption, and the trucking distance from debris to disposal or recycling facility. So 7 years have passed since that, and reconstruction is going forth, and the debris recycling center that has been put together by IOM and UNEP has recovered and recycled hundreds of thousands of tons, and created many jobs, and it's been a central part of rebuilding Mosul in Iraq. So this same process has been applied to Gaza in the last year and a couple of months of this year, and this has been instrumental for planning the rebuilding and clearance activities. We've been seeing talks of, you know, where are the places emergency cities are going to be built, and so we've been able to tell how much debris is lying in those places and how much time it would take to clean up those places for the rebuilding activity to start. But there are cases where our process doesn't really work, and this was the case in Lebanon last year. So we are currently very reliant on UNOSET providing the damage assessments that they produce through high resolution optical imagery, and that imagery costs money. And when disaster strikes or conflicts strike in a very large geographical extent, that was the case for Lebanon. Almost the entirety of the country was subject to airstrikes. They won't be able to provide damage assessments in the same time frame. So in these cases, we tend to use SAR imagery to approximate ourselves to what's the damage situation in these places. So the way we do this is we filter the regions we are interested in by spatialized conflict data, like the ones that ACLED or the Washington Institute produce. And then we'll take Sentinel-1 SAR imagery, and we will use two combined change detection algorithms, which are very much foundational models for change detection. So we use coherence change detection, CCD, and pixel-wise t-tests to be able to take imagery from before the airstrike or the event and from afterwards, and compare and look for significant changes in the pixels in the SAR imagery. And we have also been filtering the results with Nightlight's data, and then taking the results into the building footprints to assess which buildings are more likely to have been damaged and which are not. So this method also has several limitations. We do get a lot of false negatives from CCD and a lot of false positives from pixel-wise t-testing to a big extent, and so these have to be greatly filtered to actually represent what's going on in the field. And this comes from our lived experience in Lebanon, where we compared our assessment using just INSAR with UN Habitat's data, which they use PlanetScope for producing. So this was a very manual process they went through. They used PlanetScope 3-meter resolution imagery to pinpoint buildings that were damaged. And in some cases, so here you have two cadastres where we had the most difficulties. So the places where we have too many false positives we can deal with, but with those places where we have too many false negatives in our data, this can mean. So in this case, it's Yareen. So it's a 45% of all damaged buildings that we are missing with just the SAR imagery algorithm technique. So it's a big part of the puzzle that we are currently missing with this method. So what am I asking here today? We are asking for support from machine learning researchers and experts to evaluate other ways we could be going around this issue. We are using very much foundational models for imagery processing. We haven't gotten into multimodal data fusion, neural networks. So we are very much interested if anyone would want to help us with that. But most importantly, we are convinced that we need a high to a very high optical resolution imagery for just the areas that we can select through the radar, the INSAR process, so we can filter areas and reduce the cost of the actual imagery we need from optical high resolution, but we do need that to produce something as close as ground truth as we can. And of course, we are constantly on the lookout for partners who want to collaborate and provide ground truthing through a research project or partnership. This is what we had with UN Habitat in Lebanon, for instance, but we are always open to this. And so to go back to my initial statement, what we're looking for is to be able to cover more of these natural disasters or conflicts. We are currently very much limited by these technical constraints. So please help us reach more of these events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yevgeny. Important work. So we covered a lot of topics: INSAR, damage assessment, response recovery, a lot of rich places where we could be asking some questions. So Jen, Danielle, Maria, Nachiket, who wants to kick us off?
I'm happy to jump in first. I just want to first say I appreciate how you're thinking about how to, yes, mitigate harms related to conflict. I think that's a really important problem. So I appreciate you tackling this and thinking through all the nuances here. So I'm curious, it's a newer space to me. So I'm curious, who are the humanitarian groups that are either working on the ground in debris management or like resource allocation? Like, who would you work with on like this specific part of the problem? And then like, to what extent would you consider working with like country governments in cleanup or debris management? And then broadly, just are there other nuances to working in a conflict zone that impact how you are approaching this solution?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. So I think it would be very usual for a project like this to include a lot of convincing. It's a lot of advocating in the end. It's a lot of letting local governments understand that we can't, like the UN can just pay for more trucks, and that would to some extent help facilitate the process of clearance. But recycling actually plays a very important role in these cases, and this will actually make the process much faster and more cost efficient. So these scenarios we have produced over the years, they tend to show like a 50% saving in terms of resources that are needed for clearance, and savings in time as well. So it's a lot of advocating when we think of when we have to deal with local governments. And then in terms of partners in the field, it's a lot. IOM is frequently there. UN Habitat sometimes. Mercy Corps, the World Bank. It's a mixed bag of partners. It changes from place to place. But having the number, having the quantification is really important, and being able to say because it's such a number that is hard to pinpoint. It's hard to look at something and say, oh yeah, so this is like 10,000 tons, or this is like 10 million tons. Like it's very hard for people to do that. So we try to take this expertise from demolition engineers we have at the team at UNEP and amplify that through those maps and be able to say, listen, it'll take you 10 years if you continue going through this route. And this has worked great over the course of the years. I've been focusing on specific places. So we did Iraq, we did Syria, Turkey, and now Gaza. But it's often very limited by, we need that high-res imagery that UNOSAT has access to sometimes. And then from that, we can take it on. But we want to be able to scale this operation, but we're currently unable to do so.
Thanks for that question, Danielle. We have time for one more if anyone from the panel has one. Yeah, Jim.
This can be quick, but my organization is working with a lot of academics who are doing machine learning on satellite imagery, and be happy to bring you into that fold and connect you to those folks.
Great, awesome. Thank you so much.
That'd be fantastic. Nadia or Nachiket, if you have a question, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I might take one from the Q&A. Alrighty. A question from the chat for you, Yadmi. Has this been linked at all to the impact on reducing public health issues? Is there evidence of this when debris gets sorted more quickly after a disaster? And perhaps are there any links to crisis cash and livelihood work linked, for example, to debris recycling? Thank you, Claire, for that question.
Yes, very much. This was the case with Syria, where we had dengue outbreaks right after or during the conflict. So debris clearance was prioritized according to where dengue cases were popping up, because it's directly related to stagnated water. So beginning through those places has proven effective.
Yeah. Great, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that adds kind of some compelling narratives to the importance of the work. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, panelists, for your questions, and audience as well. Keep those coming. Yadmi, congratulations. Good work. And over to you, Ree.
Yeah, thanks so much, Guilherme. And just to reiterate what Laura just said, keep the questions coming, audience. And also, we love to see all of the collaborative ideas and suggestions also happening, coming from the audience. So know if our panelists and teams are making requests or need something that you can help connect them with, by all means, throw it out there. That's what we're here for. I'm really pleased to introduce our next partnership. It's a powerhouse combination beaming in from the Rockies. Welcome CU Boulder and Better Planet Lab, along with Amnesty International. They're working to equip frontline communities with satellite data intelligence to protect themselves from environmental threats. So over to you, Zia and Michael. Sorry, Micah. Sorry, over to you, Zia and Micah.
We haven't known each other long enough, I guess. Hi there. So yes, thank you. So we'll start as soon as my slides start to move. There we go. So this is what remains of a village in northwest Kazakhstan called Berezovka. The village was located about 5 kilometers south of a multinationally owned oil and gas condensate facility called KPO. The operation was greatly expanded in 2000. Following the expansion, the villagers started to complain of sicknesses from the emissions and requested relocation and compensation, but they were ignored. In 2014, over a decade later, more than a dozen children and 3 adults were reported to have experienced dizziness, lost consciousness, and suffered seizures. Again, this was ignored. The residents were confident that the episode was due to the facility. The officials claimed the village was actually outside of the hazardous zone of toxic emissions. The Deputy Prime Minister blamed the children's illnesses on a faulty chimney and hot water plant at the local school, though later, medical reports finally acquired from a non-government-owned facility found that they had been exposed to toxic substances from the KPO facility. In 2017, after nearly 15 years of chronic health problems, continued complaints, and legal battles, residents of Berezovka were finally relocated. And over the last couple of years, KPO has actually demolished much of the village to expand their gas operations. So despite this mounting evidence, KPO refused to take responsibility for the poisoning of the residents in Berezovka. And our idea today is that there's so much remote sensing data, these incidents should actually never happen again. We know that bringing together a powerful global network and vast amounts of data can actually empower environmental defenders along with frontline and fence line communities to protect their human rights to a healthy environment. With this, we aim to end all fossil fuel production in fragile ecosystems and vulnerable communities.
This is Micah. She's the remote sensing specialist at Amnesty International. a human rights organization, a network of over 10 million members in over 150 different countries and territories in the world who campaign to end human rights abuses.
And this is Zia. He is an environmental science professor, and he also leads the Better Planet Laboratory, our secret weapon. They are a group of data scientists, lawyers, and academics with a strong track record in working with UN agencies, NGOs like us, and grassroots community organizations to develop data products for a better and fairer planet. So over the past 6 months, we've been working closely together to locate fossil fuel facilities across the globe. We've also been mapping these facilities which fall into fragile ecosystems, and then those with the largest potential adverse human impacts. We're already using this data to build out our climate justice research, bolstering evidence and known rights violations, and identifying hotspots for potential violations. But we feel we're only getting started.
Today, we present Environmental Rights Watch, a system designed by Amnesty and the Better Planet Laboratory to democratize and speed up action on human rights abuses. Environmental Rights Watch is a collection of AI-driven geospatial agents that work alongside human rights activists, defenders, and lawyers to help recognize and prevent environmental disasters. We know that a tool like this can effectively improve action today.
So let's take a look at this tool. Say I want to prevent another village like that in Kazakhstan from similar health disasters. I could quickly type into the prompt to figure out if there were other communities that could be impacted by nearby fossil fuel facilities. Here I find the location Ilubishi. It's a remote community close to oil and gas fields with a school very similar to the Berezovka school.
And using segmentation agents driven from image embeddings, we can quickly retrieve the footprints of facilities in proximity to that school. And using NASA's data, including the VIIR's nighttime lights, we can also identify which of those sites are active. This data can in turn be processed further to identify the facilities that are the most likely polluting the worst.
And then someone like me could look up the statistics on the highest emitting facility to learn not only about the emissions, but who is owned by and the proximity to fragile ecosystems. This would actually help us assign a level of criticality to support our teams here at Amnesty and defenders alike. By the way, these are real statistics about a facility derived from data sets we recently developed.
By querying additional APIs, we can synthesize near real-time and recent historical emissions data on air pollutants from tools building on NASA's EMIT, Iris, Planet's Tanager, and Sentinel-5 missions on a range of pollutants currently not available in any one platform. However, we do not just stop with this one village. Integrating epidemiological data and meteorological data, we can identify the air pollution footprint and a number of other communities at risk for Amnesty's on-ground efforts. And using a new AI-driven waterways detection dataset developed by us at the Better Planet Laboratory, we can also identify communities at risk downstream for informing grassroots data collection efforts on water pollutants.
And finally, we can use the tool to efficiently build out the research on the case. We can interrogate a curated database to support documentation of human rights abuses and develop a legal strategy. So today, Amnesty International's climate justice researchers and the Better Planet Lab are planning to publish findings on investigations into 3 specific locations where fence-line communities are being impacted by fossil fuels. In 2 of the locations, in Canada and Senegal, the fossil fuel facilities are actually new and more recently under construction. Our tool that we're already testing could also be applied to sites such as these to efficiently gather research for the team at Amnesty or other groups within or working with the community. So for example, let's zoom into the Saloum Delta of Senegal. Knowing the site of the planned construction, we can locate nearby communities which might be most impacted and fragile ecosystems such as the mangroves to understand the distance to the planned facility. This, coupled with research on the ground, we can better understand the largest human rights impacts of these communities. We can use the platform even to find similarly impacted communities and then connect those communities to build the dialogue.
And we know it doesn't stop with fossil fuels. At the Better Planet Laboratory, we estimate that 49% of the world's population is exposed to at least 3 environmental rights violations, such as those from air pollution, water pollution, and an unsafe climate. We also know there are additional polluting facilities, and that putting data into the hands of the vast network within Amnesty and others can help speed up action and prevent disasters before they happen. But we need your help to turn this vision into a reality. While we have been working together to develop the capabilities to deliver on this vision for Environmental Rights Watch, we need financing for the next phase of this vision. We're asking for $1 million over a 12-month period, with the primary aim of putting these tools into the hands of millions of activists across the world within Amnesty's network and beyond.
But we're not actually just asking for a funder. We're asking for a partner who can help us realize human rights by harnessing the power of data to catalyze action. Because in the end, we think the tool can not only help realize justice and accountability for those communities that are being impacted by fossil fuels today, but also prevent the construction of new sites and the likelihood of environmental disasters occurring in the future. If you also envision a sustainable and just future free from fossil fuels, please join us. Thank you for listening to us today.
Thanks.
Great job, my Zia. Thank you so much for this super interesting and creative connection of a lot of really important topics. Let's see if you can go ahead and stop screen sharing. I think we can get everyone on the same screen.
I will try and do that.
Lovely presentation.
Sorry, I don't use this very often.
It's okay. Even those of us who do.
I'm not sure where the stop screen share button is. It's not where I usually see it. Can you kill me?
One of our
it should be in the top left. Stop sharing.
It moved. Is that good? That's nice.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
This is why I have Zia.
Awesome. Thank you again, Danielle, Jen, Maria, Nachiket. Lots of places to ask questions here, offer comments. So I'll hand it over to you.
Maybe I'll start. I'm curious to hear. I have a couple questions. The first one is, do you see other potential partners or users for these? I think this is awesome, and I really like kind of the activists and civil rights groups type use, but just wondering if you have others in mind. And then you sort of anticipated my question with one of the last slides on like moving to other industries, but just curious, kind of thinking, what other industries are you thinking about expanding?
I could take the first question, and then maybe Zia, you can follow up. So for the first question, yes, we at Amnesty, we're already working with the Wet'suwet'en Nation in Canada, and they have a very robust geospatial team already. So we expect, sort of a partnership, and we're going to have them test the tool and see what value they might be able to get out of it and give some feedback. We also have a community that we're developing relationships with in Brazil and the Guanabara Bay. So we already have a network, I think, that we can tap into. Plus, Amnesty also has, we work with the Digital Verification Corps, which is a group of groups of students across the globe in different universities. So we also will work with them, likely to China, test the tool, develop the tool, and then, when they go out into spread into the world with their intent, they might be able to spread this use of this tool also. So.
Absolutely. And I've got my answer kind of answers both of these questions. So one of the initial interactions that we had with the United Nations Committee for the Rights of the Child was pulling together like this for facilities, lead smelting and production facilities in Peru. And we found that to be very useful for them, and it helped them put forward an investigation into the government of Peru on lead poisoning. And this just opens out another kind of whole realm of potential partnerships. And recently, the Center for Global Development had a call on developing systems for better understanding the pollutants and the impacts of lead poisoning. There are many other types of facilities, of course. The nice thing about the approach that I think we've developed with Amnesty is that it can be replicated across these different types of facilities, depending on the partners that are interested in working on this.
Great question, Maria.
I'd love to jump in. I think there's an incredible use case right now, I think with really around more transparent and accountable supply chains. In particular, a lot of companies are being asked to be more transparent and are paying money to make sure that everything as part of their supply chain is ethically sourced and there are no human rights violations. And there's laws, and companies are paying for this. So I think on that, one of our portfolio companies, Open Supply Hub, they might be worth partnering with here. And they're working on creating an accessible and collaborative supply chain platform. And they're covering a lot of different sectors, but I think oil and gas is a big part of the private sector and would be worth. So happy to make that connection.
Thank you. That's really exciting. We haven't done supply chain work on oil and gas, but we have done it extensively on food systems. And so much of the port infrastructure, the road infrastructure, rail infrastructure, we have actually built databases and have logistics models that are already running. We have a new platform that we're releasing with another partner in the next few months doing that. So doing that for oil and gas is very exciting. And yeah, we'd love to be connected. Thank you.
Love to see those connections. Jen or Nachiket, do you have any questions for Micah and Zia or comments? Okay, I'm going to take one from the audience, kind of from a technical angle. Babak is asking if you can talk a little bit more about the technologies that you are using or would be using, especially behind connecting kind of user input questions and having the result be maps and analyses and different results.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of you have kind of interacted with ChatGPT and Gemini and all of those kind of technologies. The way those technologies work, and they're increasingly becoming multimodal, is by interrogating natural language. And the main innovation that we are presenting here is a chain of agents that can also interact with geospatial data. Now, part of the problem with that, in doing that, and there's a few different groups out there that have got prototypes out, and Google even had a demo in November last year, that hasn't gone public yet, to do this, is that actually, unlike natural language, where you can just scrape the internet and you can just train, or images even, you can just scrape, vast data and train images, and you can do retrieval augmented, generation on that and retrieve information. With geospatial data, it's not like that. So it's not in a machine readable form. And so actually what you need is a very cleverly curated set of data. And then on top of that, then you'll develop kind of these agents that will, through prompt engineering, will generate code that will call on, in the case of segmentation agent, call on segmentation algorithms that will then, generate the footprints. Those agents might give more information back to another LLM that is then passed back to the user. So you kind of have this standard kind of lang chain or these other kind of ways of chaining agents together, but it's with the geospatial edge to it. And the really nice thing that we have working with Amnesty is that we're able to curate the right data sets in terms of the pollutants. And that actually is one of the major pain points, because there's you would have seen on the near real-time pollution, I put Carbon Mapper on there. Now you might have heard of Carbon Mapper, a really successful, early stage project that's really cool, building on decades of research. But we were also pulling in other data in there. So pulling in Sentinel data in there and pulling in, PM 2.5 data from Washington State University. And for a researcher, from environmental rights activists, they don't actually know which of the data sets are valid, which of them are reliable. And actually they have to go to all these different websites to get information. So that's one of the values as well of pulling in these different APIs as well. And to query that, we have kind of metadata and on the different APIs that need pulling up, so they kind of chain to the prompts that people are making. Happy to answer more, happy on a one-on-one, or you can follow up.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of moving parts. A quick follow-up to that one is, are these agents published somewhere or shared or open in any way?
Yeah, so part of the next phase of this work is actually to develop a system that is publicly available. One of the, our mandate is to make everything open and publicly available. And so that's also very interesting. I was in San Francisco just a few weeks ago, and someone was developing a similar tool for the insurance industry, but it was completely closed source. So we also think there's a real opportunity here for being disruptive, developing these technologies, making them open, and actually pushing forward competition in the private sector too, which isn't really our domain, right? We're more interested in the humanitarian space, but we do think that we can actually push that space forward as well by making things open.
Wow, I love that. Love that additional pressure in that direction as well. The chat is alive with a lot of questions for you all. I unfortunately can't get to all of them, but I hope that you all are able to engage on the chat. This was a fantastic conversation, and we're super grateful for your time and for the work that you're doing. Ree, over to you.
Absolutely. I'll echo that. Big round of applause to Micah and to Zia. Fantastic presentation. Thank you all. Keep the discussion churning. This is great. Our next pitch is a collaboration between researchers at Duke and MIT who are doing some really interesting applied science to better understand water quality and help communities monitor their water resources and improve their health and livelihoods. So let's join Ryan and Sharif in Southeast Madagascar where their work is happening. And team, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I also don't have a ton of experience with Teams. Can everyone see my screen and hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Ryan Parks, and I'm a PhD student at Duke University.
Hello, my name is Sharif Islam, and I'm a postdoc at MIT.
Today, we are delighted to present our project titled Informed Decision Making on Hydrologically Mediated Infectious Diseases in Madagascar. This initiative represents an innovative collaboration among Duke's Planet Lab, MIT's Space Enable Group, Improper, which is an NGO I founded, and Health in Harmony to implement and iteratively evaluate sustainable, practical public health interventions within communities in the Manumbu Special Reserve, which I will refer to from now on as the MSR. Our study area is the MSR, which is located along Madagascar's southeastern coastline, which is a protected rainforest region with a warm and humid tropical climate. The region around the MSR contains the highest incidence rate of malaria in the country and suffers from frequent tropical cyclones. The MSR is home to more than 30 under-resourced remote villages with a total population of roughly 12,000 people, where humans and animals rely on the same limited natural surface waters as their main sources of drinking, bathing, and cooking water. The two main health concerns in the MSR are diarrhea and malaria. As the intensity of Category 5 cyclones in the MSR increases, communities in and around the MSR face mounting challenges. The rapid decline of the Manumbu rainforest, driven by subsistence land use tied to nutritional and economic poverty in the MSR, further undermines community resilience. These climate stress communities already suffer from high rates of malnutrition and limited access to healthcare, making them acutely vulnerable to diarrhea and malaria due to the compounding impacts of cyclone-induced flooding, the formation of standing water, and widespread contamination of drinking water sources. To better understand these community-scale vulnerabilities to extreme weather events, we will employ a multi-scale monitoring approach. This includes pre- and post-cyclone satellite imagery, drone-based surveys, field-based ground truthing, and in-situ data from water samples and stream gauges. These tools will help us characterize forest degradation, map flood extent and persisting standing water, assess drinking water quality, as well as monitor our reforestation and clean water interventions in at least 10 MSR villages. In all, our driving question in seeking to understand this problem is, how do extreme climate events affect water-related health outcomes in the MSR? Madagascar is the third most vulnerable country in the world to the negative impacts of climate change. Understanding how the MSR forest responds to the changes in this strongly coupled human environment system is a critical component of community resilience, hence reducing the risk of climate-related disasters. It is paramount to understand the effect that cyclones have on the hydrologic systems of marginalized and vulnerable communities and what we can do about this problem. We work with and employ people living in the MSR. I've spent over 5 months here over the past 2 years and will be returning this fall for an entire semester. Our office is located in the nearest town 30 miles north, and our team that doesn't live within the community visits these beautiful people weekly.
As part of the fieldwork, we already have established monitoring systems, including stream gases, strategically installed to measure water level fluctuation in real time, enabling precise tracking of hydrological changes associated with disease outbreaks. Additionally, we have conducted bacteriological analysis of local water sources, identifying that each village we tested had drinking water sources exceeding the threshold of WHO for fecal contamination. And our fieldwork has also integrated advanced multispectral drone service to generate high-resolution imagery, providing detailed insights into land use changes and flood impacts post-cyclone events. Further enhancing our observational capabilities, we have leveraged Sentinel-2 synthetic aperture radar satellite data that is crucial for accurately mapping and analyzing standing water and flooding extents following cyclone events. As part of the community demand for our intervention is consistently evident and reflected in ongoing engagement and cooperation and active participation from villagers and local leadership. A prime example of this successful partnership is our recent project through Improper, the NGO that Ryan has founded, where they have installed 60 rainwater harvesting tanks, is holding 5,000 liters of water. And this intervention provided clean drinking water to 3 villages, and we are currently evaluating this tank's ability to reduce the incidence of diarrhea.
Building on our rainwater harvesting project, our team has implemented a targeted coffee tree reforestation initiative in the MSR. By employing local farmers to cultivate coffee and other woody perennial trees on previously deforested land, this project simultaneously restores ecosystem function and generates sustainable income. The planted trees help stabilize soil, reduce erosion, and filter contaminated runoff before it reaches critical drinking water sources. This natural filtration process significantly improves the quality of surface water used for drinking, bathing, and cooking, which reduces the incidence of diarrheal disease. Moreover, by decreasing the presence of open, sun-exposed puddles and marshes, which are prime mosquito breeding grounds, this shaded agroforestry system directly curtails the transmission of malaria. The coffee tree's canopy intercepts rainfall and slows surface flow, minimizing the creation of standing water. Coffee produced through this project is sold in the United States, and 100% of the profits are reinvested back into the very communities through clean water infrastructure and additional reforestation efforts. We threw a party in New York City last week where we successfully sold Improper coffee to our guests, which will fund our next round of rainwater harvesting tanks.
So as part of the solution, we are merging expertise of Duke universities in detailed field-based ecological and hydrological monitoring with MIT's advanced satellite data analysis capabilities from the Space Enable group located at MIT Media Lab. And this unique interdisciplinary collaboration ensures a comprehensive data-driven approach that bridges local insights with broad-scale analysis, fundamentally enhancing our predictive capabilities and intervention precision. So the following diagram is actually proposing a framework which actually outlines our integrated research and intervention developed through collaboration between Planet Lab at Duke University and Space Enable Group at MIT. And it aims at understanding and reducing cyclone-induced water-related health burdens, especially diarrhea and malaria in these MSR villages located in the southeastern Madagascar. So if you look at so there is 4 components. The first component is Earth system science. And the process begins with this component where we'll use a combination of remote sensing data coming from different sensors, opticals or multispectral drones and others, and in situ hydrological and water quality monitoring coming from water samples and stream gases to characterize the physical drivers of water-related illness. And the second component of this framework is socio-ecological systems. And as part of that, we integrate environmental data with weekly health outcomes collected by the NGO called Health in Harmony from MSR villages. And this includes diagnosis of malaria and diarrhea, and population demographics, land use data, and local village knowledge about water use and forest change. And by linking this data to environmental conditions, we can map spatial and temporal patterns of disease outbreaks, pinpointing areas where and when communities are at most risk from waterborne and vector-borne diseases during cyclone season. And the third component of this framework is the decision-making aspect, and the decision support system co-developed with Blue Raster, a company, enables stakeholders, including Health in Harmony and local government, to use real-time geospatial data to identify priority zones for health-focused interventions. For example, the tool can highlight areas with repeated post-cyclone standing water and high malaria incidence. And it also can identify the surface water sources are frequently contaminated and correlated with spikes in diarrheal disease. And the last component of this framework is the technology aspect of it. And this component ensures continuous improvement of the decision support tool that we are developing by incorporating field-level outcomes and new data. And it also facilitates monitoring and evaluation of interventions such as rainwater harvesting systems and our coffee-centric agroforestry projects.
Funding from this proposal will enable our capacity to improve interventions addressing water-related adverse health outcomes associated with cyclones in this vulnerable region. We are seeking $250,000 over the course of 1 year to support the expansion of our monitoring infrastructure, enhancement of satellite and drone analytics, and ongoing community intervention programs. Funding will address critical needs such as purchasing equipment, acquiring more land, seedlings, maintaining sophisticated data collection systems, training local technicians, and sustaining robust community health monitoring. We are seeking technical support from NASA and Earth observation data processing and cloud computing resources, alongside further capacity building in the form of partners and partnerships, which are essential to realizing our project's full potential. Through NASA's Lifelines initiative, our integrated approach promises to substantially enhance local resilience to climate-driven health threats in the MSR. By combining satellite technology with targeted ground-level interventions, we aim to meaningfully reduce disease burden in the form of malaria and diarrhea, improve livelihoods, and establish a scalable solution adaptable to other vulnerable regions in Madagascar and hopefully worldwide. Thank you for considering our proposal.
Thank you, Ryan and Sri. Good work. Okay, we're waiting for it to swap back to the stop sharing. I loved the deep dive into a specific country context. Thank you for that kind of focus. I think it's a great way to look at things. Danielle, Jen, Maria, Nachiket, does someone want to kick us off with a question or comment? Go ahead.
I do not have a question. I do have a comment. Great job. Yeah. I really like the localization and the community engagement and integration. I really like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'll jump in with a quick question. Playing, I guess, a bit devil's advocate in this moment. So there's a lot we already know in this space. Like, we know standing water is bad, and we know water contamination is a real issue. And so, like, in my shoes, like, hypothetically, I have $300,000 to spend. Why would I need more data when I can clearly see the impact here of spending money on what improper is already building? So the rainwater harvesting or the coffee tree forest growth. Like both of those solutions I'm like bought in on, and I know I can trace the impact. So what is the additional value add? Like what if I only have 300,000, why should I allocate some of this to more data as opposed to the solutions that I clearly are needed and I can see the evidence that they're working?
That's a good question. I think in order for the two interventions to be successful, there needs to be a baseline of data. We've only sampled 10 of the 30 villages, so we in one time each per year. So although we do have a snapshot, I think comprehensively characterizing the mechanisms of diarrheal and malaria transmission in this region among the 30 villages is critical, in addition to assessing the intervention. So say we reforest huge swaths of land and develop rainwater tanks. How exactly, we think that's going to help. Okay, how? What are the specific outputs in terms of data? And we'd quantify that through the data that we're seeking funding for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would like to add that, the idea is that we would like to scale up our work, so not bounding to only work in the 13 villages. So similar issues are having in neighboring areas as well. So if we want to scale it up, so we need actually funding for that.
Great question, Danielle. I liked the confines there. Jen or Maria, is there anything you'd like to add or ask? Go ahead, Maria.
I guess a follow-up question to Danielle's question. Have you thought about also leveraging the data as a potential intervention as well? Like we've seen several cases here where kind of having this data and the analysis helps to do anticipatory action or helps kind of address inform decision making, not only to kind of complement the solutions you already have, but also kind of I don't know if I'm expressing myself well, but using the data as part of building a solution as well. I don't know if that's clear, but let me know if you have any thoughts on that.
Is your question asking how can the data be a solution itself?
Yeah, so as background, we at Mercy Corps Ventures, we have a few startups that leverage this data to build products based on that. So either as an example, we have a hyper localized weather solution. They collect data, they create a forecast of what the weather is like, and then they use that to provide services to farmers so they know when to plant and how to do it, or they use that for insurance purposes. So that's kind of where my mind is going. So I'm just wondering if you've thought of something around those lines.
One thing that we've thought of with respect to using the data as a decision support tool is to identify priority zones post-cyclone. So with our complemented stream gauge and remote sensing product, we hope that we can identify villages or regions that are both vulnerable, but after the cyclone has hit, prime locations for standing water, which is the main breeding ground for the Anopheles mosquito that transmits malaria in our region. And so right after a cyclone, Health and Harmony, which is another NGO working in this region, can know the villages to prioritize to deploy bed nets for example.
Yeah, so I agree with what Ryan said, and it's actually helping Health and Harmony actually to have a better data-informed decisions in terms of where they can actually focus and how they can actually help the communities. So we are building this tool as part of the solution as well. So for sure, that is going to help the NGO to focus more on the areas where the risk is high.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I have a question. And I heard you talk about let's see, drone data, survey, field surveys, gauges, satellite data, a lot of different types with completely different formats and I'm sure fields and metadata. Has that been a challenge for you, kind of getting the data sets to talk to each other in a way that presents a clear message that can be acted upon with these decisions or analysis, or has that been fairly straightforward?
That's a good question. So the Planet Lab, which I'm a member of, focuses on in situ data, and the lab that Sharif is a member of works on Earth observation. While we've both worked in the region and done projects such as the mapping of the standing water and then my work on the acute water quality, we have not integrated them. And so we wrote a proposal to NASA, A67, for community resilience last year, seeking funding to integrate our data into a low overhead product through Blue Raster that can equip Health and Harmony and other decision makers there based on all the data inputs. But one of the major reasons we're seeking funding is to, as you said, have the data speak to each other since we're already doing the work.
Right. Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for humoring the moderator's question. I think we're about at time.
Thank you for asking.
Of course. Good work, Brian and Sharif. Thank you, panelists. There are a couple of comments in the chat if you wouldn't mind jumping in and taking a look at those. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Brian. Thanks, Sharif. Big round of applause. I don't know if everybody is as excited about all of these pitches as I am, because I'm learning something new. Even though I've actually heard them before, I'm learning something new on all of these. And please get your questions answered, throw out ideas. We'll keep connecting on all of these incredible projects. We've only got 3 more left. Time has flown by for me. I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, but next I'm pleased to welcome the Urban Malaria Lab at Loyola University Chicago. So let's imagine ourselves in northwest Nigeria, where the team is using satellite data to help health officers control the spread of one of the deadliest diseases. Ifoma, over to you. Ifoma, you might still be on mute. We can try and help you out, but there you go.
Oh,
perfect.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. My name is Ifoma Ozodiegu. I am an assistant professor of health informatics and data science at Loyola University Chicago. I lead a team of Earth observation experts and scientists, and we've been focused over the last 4 years on developing locally driven and locally owned decision support frameworks and software solutions to inform malaria prevention. Today, we're in pursuit of grant funds to enable us to pilot and scale our LLM version of our malaria reprioritization tool. The software solution was developed by my team to support malaria program officers to prevent malaria deaths and disease in flood-affected communities. So I'll start by laying out the problem. So on September 2024, water breached the Alao Dam in Maiduguri, Borno State. Maiduguri is located in Nigeria, and it submerged 15% of the city. By nightfall, 500,000 people were displaced, 37 deaths were reported, and nearly 7,000 shelters were damaged. By September 17, reports of outbreaks of disease as well as disruptions to health services emerged. One displaced person said that they had waited over a day to receive care, and a healthcare worker reported both outbreaks of malaria and waterborne disease. This story is a snapshot of how flooding exacerbates malaria risk and health risk in general. Unfortunately, extreme flooding is becoming more frequent globally, and the plot that I'm showing is the frequency of extreme flooding in malaria endemic countries. While the relationship between flooding and malaria is quite complex. The mechanisms is clear. Flooding expands vector breeding sites. It destroys housing, limiting access to care, and it also displaces people to high exposure environments. To give you a sense of why I'm really passionate about us preventing malaria, here are some facts and figures. Malaria is the leading cause of childhood disease and deaths. In 2023, according to the World Malaria Report, 263 malaria cases were reported. 597 persons died from malaria. And the numbers that you're seeing for cases is an increase by 11 million from the previous year. While we have made some progress with deaths, over the last 10 years, 95% of all malaria cases and deaths emerged from sub-Saharan Africa. And Nigeria has the highest global burden of malaria cases and deaths. This is the reason why my team has really been focused on this region and this country in particular. With the impact that we expect to see from the USAID cuts, we anticipate that malaria cases are going to increase by 13 million and deaths by 100,000. I want you to meet Mr. Chukwu, Senior Program Officer at Nigeria's National Malaria Elimination Program. He is on the front lines of this issue. He leads analytics to support both resource allocation and mobilization within the national program. He understands that communities at risk of flooding need support before, during, and after flooding, but the current systems do not allow it. Resource mobilization in Nigeria occurs once every 3 years, and he needs data to be able to justify prioritization of flood-prone communities. Unfortunately, malaria data in the format in which it's collected lacks granularity to capture in risk in flood-prone communities. Our team has been looking at this issue. Our analysis and data and research studies suggest that Earth observation data is particularly useful for malaria risk assessment. In our work, we have found that information and variables like vegetation indices, building heights, moisture indices, and nighttime light help to improve malaria risk prediction. We obtain we use different data sources and data sets, including data from NASA Moody's Terra Vegetation Indices data sets. We've used the Google Building Heights data set. We also, to estimate flooding risk, rely on imagery from Sentinel-1 in addition to other data sets. But there is a problem here. Despite the abundance of EO data, Mr. Chukwu and other people in his position lack the proficiency, the training, and the internet access sometimes to obtain and use EO data in the current format. So what needs to happen? They need to ensure that we can sustainably support this better decision-making in countries such as Nigeria. There needs to be tools that support malaria risk assessment, particularly in flood-prone communities, and enable Mr. Chukwu and his colleagues to incorporate EO data. And the tool should be designed for those with limited technical skills and internet access. That is the value proposition of this tool that my team has developed. The malaria reprioritization tool, it helps users, non-technical users, with limited technical skills to conduct malaria risk assessment, enabling them to integrate EO data and epidemiological data, including malaria incidence data, so that they can enable improved and timely resource allocation for flood-prone and affected communities. This is unlike several tools out there that require programming skills. One of the things that we also want you to keep in mind is that all our work is locally owned and co-developed by programs. So we worked with the program to co-develop the MRPT, and it relies on the insights from all the studies we have conducted in Nigeria. Over the last 3 years, we've conducted a series of epidemiological studies to understand malaria burden, particularly in urban areas. And this has helped us inform the methodological framework embedded within the tool. We've also compared different types of models to understand the conditions in which they are useful and comparable, enhancing the quality of the methodologies we offer within the tool. The format in which the program officers receive or are able to the format in which the software consumes data is in the format which the program officers are familiar with. We provide them with a database of pre-processed EO data that they can then use and impute into the data, into the tool. The outputs are aligned with information needs for resource mobilization and national malaria strategic plans. In addition, it offers both online and offline capabilities, and we have also incorporated a large language model-enabled version based on feedback from our users. So to give you a sense of the core and initial version of the MRPT, users, first of all, can upload data in a CSV format and a shapefile format. They can clean the data. Data from national programs are often quite messy. Data that is also pre-processed needs to be combined with this data as well. And so they can impute missing data. They can then use the different models and methodologies that we have within the tool to conduct their risk assessment. So here is for one of the cities in Nigeria where they're able to rank areas based on different variables. You also have to understand that different variables matter in different settings. And so they have the flexibility to decide which variables they can incorporate in risk assessment. They have the ability to download a description of their process, enabling them to generate reports and presentations for different stakeholders. In addition, the tool also offers functionality for micro-planning, enabling them to understand, for instance, in urban settings, which areas are of high risk based on levels of formality. So they can classify places that are slums, they can classify areas that are more formal, and then they can work with their teams based on the information they download from the tool to inform targeting of interventions in this area. In addition, there is a functionality for macro level planning, where they can estimate the number of nets, in this case, that they would need to use to cover the entire region, as well as coverage levels based on specific criteria. The LLM version of this tool is particularly for those who still struggle to utilize a point-and-click tool like what we have developed. There are many individuals within the program that really have very limited technical skills and require guidance in conducting analysis. So with this version based on GPT-4, they can actually use natural language to conduct the analysis. Here is an example of running a standard analysis within the tool. The tool tells them what parameters and values that was used in the analysis. In addition, it provides them with information on which areas are most vulnerable. They can then generate the maps that enable them understand depending on the variables they choose, what areas are most vulnerable. We are continually improving the tool, and we have another release coming up in October where we're going to be leveraging generative EO models such as TerraMind and incorporating that into the computational engine. Our work has had extensive impact. It was used by the National Malaria Elimination Program in 2004 and 2005 to inform resource allocation for 43 million people, including those in flood-affected communities. This was the very first time flood risk was considered in national malaria decisions. Testimonials also show a shift. There has been a number of feedback from people indicating that decisions are now more data-driven and strategic. Mr. Chukwu and his colleagues see extensive value in the tool, and they have also indicated they want to see us apply it to new cases and also to cover more use case and more geographies. Our team comprises of both a local team and the Chicago team. I lead the Chicago team within the Urban Malaria Lab, and I have over 10 years of experience working with national health programs. I actually used to work within the Nigerian National Health Program, and I understand the conditions in which they work. I developed the very first national model that was used for subnational tailoring of malaria interventions. I work alongside Laurette, who is a PhD EO level scientist. She has extensive experience in geospatial modeling, tool development, and benchmarking. We work together as well with Bernard, who has extensive experience in data science and software engineering. And our local team support us both in stakeholder engagement, data collection, and analysis. Our work has been supported over the last 4 years by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We have a number of partnerships outside of Nigeria, we've worked and continue to work with individuals in the national malaria control programs in both Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire, and also have enormous and extensive partnerships with individuals at the World Health Organization. We'll be working with them to scale the tool regionally. We also work through, all our work is done also in collaboration with local universities, which I have listed here as well. So what is our ask? First of all, I want to tell you what our vision is. We envision that malaria program officers in endemic countries have actionable data and resources to prevent malaria cases and deaths attributable to flooding. And in order for us to do that, we require funding between $700,000 to $1 million for 2 years to enable us to pilot the MRPT AI assistance. We want to scale to new geographies and apply to new use cases. We're also looking for compute credits to enable us improve our runtime, and as well as collaborations with software developers to improve functionality. I want to reiterate that no child deserves to die from malaria, and floods should not exacerbate malaria risk. So I ask you to partner with us to turn flooding from a trigger of malaria risk to a trigger for action. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Let's get a round of applause for the Urban Malaria Lab. Thank you, Rufoma. I will have us jump into questions. We have time for a couple. Panelists, if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing your screen so we can see everyone's faces a little bit bigger. No worries. Panelists, over to you. Who wants to brave the first question or comment?
I can go. In terms of the impact that you mentioned, the 43 million people that you have been able to cater to, have you been able to really also look at the end goal sort of an impact, saying how much was the malaria incidence reduced in that 43 million population?
That's a wonderful question and something that we're aspiring to do. Unfortunately, that also requires us to collect extensive amounts of data, and we're trying to do that. So we have access to the malaria incidence data, and the net distribution had just started rolling out for people this year. And with the incidence data, we can start to track. But this work has been ongoing for 3 years, and we actually informed the very first prioritization of interventions in Nigeria last year. And the initial analysis seems to indicate that with the work that we've done so far, in targeting of interventions, specifically in a very small region, that the number of malaria cases actually remains stable. So to give you a better sense of what is happening in that particular case, the program didn't have enough money to give nets to everybody. So they really had to identify which place is most vulnerable and target the nets to those areas. And so there was a concern that if everybody doesn't get nets, which was the previous approach, the universal distribution approach, that it would lead to a spike in malaria cases. But that hasn't happened, because through using our tool and through our work, they were able to target those who are most vulnerable. And we haven't seen a spike in cases based on that data. So that's what's been happening so far.
Wow, that's a super interesting proof of concept. Good question, Nachiket. Danielle, Jen, Maria, anything from your ends?
This is Jen. I just have a comment. I think your program sounds very, very impactful, very mature, and the way you presented it was both enthusiastic, clear and to the point, and very well done. So the one kind of question I have, but I'm not sure, I think you may be too mature for this, but have you done any work with the Microsoft AI for Good lab?
No, not at all. We've just been doing this work with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates and in collaboration with local universities and institutions.
Okay, I'd be happy to connect you with them because I think there might be some alignment in the work you're doing.
I appreciate that.
I'd love to jump in, building off of the previous question. What other proof points do you need to have in place before you consider scaling outside of Nigeria? And then second question that I have, I think with the launch of the malaria vaccine, have you thought about how you might coordinate with the rollout of that, or any thoughts about the vaccine and how that might integrate into your work and the data?
Yeah, these are excellent questions. So for us, one of the key things we want to prove is that the MRPT AI assistant is able to enable people without technical skills actually make better decisions. So we want to see and how that performs, because really this is the very, very first time anyone has said, okay, let's hand things over to people that are actually making these decisions and doing the analysis so that they can have the data, they can have access to resources to make better decisions. So that's the first thing we want to prove is if you don't have a statistical background, once you have access to the data and an assistant that guides you, can you come to a good conclusion on where the high and low risk areas would be? So that's something we want to understand. We also want to be able to understand if many people are using this, how well will our platform perform, right? So we want to be able to scale that platform across Nigeria. In October, we'll be working with about 21 program officers who will be using the MRPT platform. So we don't really know, if we can carry all that analysis simultaneously. So we want to do that slowly before we scale. And then, of course, we want to build out our team and make sure that we have all the right people to scale as we move forward. With respect to the vaccine, excellent. We really would want to incorporate that into our platform. We only work with what the program asked us to do. So they asked us that they wanted us to develop this platform to help them with nets, which is one of their biggest investments. In fact, 3 states in Nigeria, they spent about $100 million distributing nets over I think it was like 2 years ago. So they wanted to make sure that they were getting the best value for this money that they're putting in. Nigeria really hasn't started spending a lot of money in vaccines yet, but I anticipate as they start doing that, they will ask us to incorporate that into the platform as well.
Thank you so much, Ifoma. Big round of applause. I think that's all the time we have in terms of questions for now. Again, throw them into the chat. Really fantastic points, and love to hear all the conversation happening. Next up, we're going back down to Mozambique again, where James and the team from Clinton Health Access Initiative are using satellite data to better anticipate and address health risks from cyclones before they happen. So James, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rhiannon. And on behalf of my Mozambique team, hello from Evergreen, Colorado. So hi to, I think, Micah, who's just a few miles north of me in Boulder. Let me make sure that this is working okay. The slides. Can you see my slides?
Looks great.
Perfect. All right, then hello and welcome, or benvindo. And I'm James Colborn. I'm a senior technical advisor for the Clinton Health Access Initiative. We'll go with Chai from here on out. And here on behalf of to talk to you today about the risk-based forecasting system that our team, which consists of myself, Rachel Fowler, the International Federations of Red Cross and Red Crescent, and our IFRC, and our teams at Chai and our IFRC in Mozambique, that we've developed to help minimize the impacts of cholera and malaria outbreaks following tropical cyclones in Mozambique. I think you're going to hear a lot of similarities between the last talk, which I think is good because it was a great talk. So one tropical storm, that was all it took in 2023 to affect over 1 million people, kill almost 200, destroy more than 100,000 homes, 1,000 schools, and 100 health facilities in Mozambique. And that was just one storm. This map shows historical cyclone paths, and it shows how vulnerable Mozambique is. Every year, about 5 storms make landfall in Mozambique, and that frequency has been increasing in recent years. Each of these storms not only cause damage through wind, rain, and flooding, but also often result in outbreaks of malaria and cholera. And the health impacts of these disease outbreaks are often worse than those of the storms themselves. These storms are not surprises. Existing cyclone forecasting models that utilize, among other sources, Earth observation data allow us to know when and where these storms will hit, within obviously a degree of uncertainty. After every storm that makes landfall, there are agencies and people on the ground helping the impacted people respond and rebuild. And these efforts are obviously incredibly helpful, but they're also incredibly costly. The World Bank alone mobilized $150 million for the cyclone described above. And given the number of aid agencies that respond to these disasters, they can also be incredibly inefficient, duplicative, and most relevantly, they unfortunately do not prevent negative impacts from happening in the future. Each year, more storms make landfall, and the cycle repeats itself. Well, we can do better. In addition to cyclone forecast data, remote sensing data gives us the opportunity to identify communities that are most vulnerable to the health impacts of these storms, how many people live there, and what they need to build resilience to and help mitigate these health outcomes before the storm hits. If we couple this with the existing cyclone forecast to quantify the needed funding for these communities prior to the landfall of the storm, we give ourselves a chance to have a much more significant, efficient, and cost-effective impact. The question is, how do we move from raw remote sensing data, such as the locations of landfall for previous cyclones and the extent of flooding after the storms, as shown here on the left, to something more quantifiable that the country can use for operational decision-making? Our solution is to use risk-based forecasting. So why risk-based forecasting? So the traditional disease forecasting system, such as malaria early warning, this malaria early warning system shown here that we helped develop for Mozambique, they usually try to prevent or predict a rise in cases by a specific amount, for example, 5 to 10%, at a specific time and place, for example, 3 to 4 weeks in the future in X district or community. And in doing so, they open themselves up for increased risk of failing. The more specific you try to be with your predictions, the more difficult it is to be correct. While these systems still play a key role in epidemic preparedness and response, I'm still invested in this one here, so I'm not trying to talk too bad about it. Their uncertainty can limit uptake and confidence beyond the disease programs and where they are located. So moving beyond malaria, for example, to other climate-sensitive diseases ends up being quite difficult with these types of systems. Instead, what we are proposing is to forecast risk, and more specifically, the risk of outbreaks of malaria and cholera following tropical storms and cyclones. Think of this as sort of a FuseNet for health type system. We are combining different types of data from various different sources to classify districts according to their hazard, exposure, and vulnerability levels, and using the rankings of these classifications to calculate an overall risk score. Here I'm showing an example that uses existing data from the country that we've combined with freely available remote sensing data. More specifically, we're combining different types of remote sensing data and pairing it with data from different in-country data sources, such as demographic and health data, to define hazards, vulnerability, and exposure to ultimately determine that overall risk. Specifically for hazards, we use climate and weather anomalies for temperature, rainfall, and soil moisture, all from NASA sources, along with a number of people impacted from previous cyclones from UNEP. For exposure, we've used historical incidents of malaria, cholera, diarrhea, and dysentery, while for vulnerability, we've used demographic and health information system information, such as population and health facility density, all of which come from the Mozambique Ministry of Health. In addition to population data from WorldPop. These are all aggregated at the district level so that they can be ranked and combined in order to generate a final risk ranking. We will also explore additional remote sensing data, such as satellite imagery and flooding data, to better characterize risk and to validate our rankings and projections. Now, when we have a prediction about the timing, location, and severity of a cyclone making landfall, we will know which areas are most at risk, how many people live in these areas, and what specifically makes them at risk. If we house the system within the country's centralized health information system, it will allow us to generate alerts for the most at-risk communities, which, when combined with anticipatory cash transfers or anticipatory action financing, such as those employed elsewhere by IFRC, will allow the country and partners to implement specific mitigation measures that are tailored to these populations at risk. Finally, data collection on hazards, vulnerability, and exposure, coupled with data on the impact of mitigation measures, can be fed back into the centralized system to allow us to monitor the effectiveness of all phases of the system and improve it as it is being used. To realize this vision and conduct a pilot of all phases of the system in Mozambique would not require significant investment. We are expecting an investment of approximately $500,000 over 3 years, would provide us with the time to gather the consensus with the government and stakeholders on the definitions of risk and thresholds for decision-making, explore additional data sources and opportunities to improve our data input data, create a dashboard that integrates within the existing health information system in the country, many of which CHI has been integral to developing and continues to support, and to pilot delivery of both information on alerts and anticipatory financing for mitigation efforts to the at-risk communities and community data collection. This would prove the viability of our concept and generate the evidence needed not only to scale the system nationally, but to expand to other regions and include other climate-sensitive diseases. Furthermore, while it won't prevent future cyclones, this small investment has the potential to save the country and partners millions of dollars in health-related impacts of cyclones and unnecessary and duplicative disaster response efforts. We're close to realizing our vision of reducing the public health impact of extreme weather events. Most of the information is there. Most of the data and tools already exist. The Mozambique team of CHI and IFRC are uniquely positioned to realize this vision. CHI has a long-standing relationship with the government of Mozambique and is a trusted partner in developing technical assistance, providing technical assistance, program evaluation, and implementation support to the country. IFRC has a global reputation as a leader in humanitarian assistance and response following public health emergencies, a strong reputation and track record of data collection through their CBS system, and delivering cash through anticipatory actions. Furthermore, this work would build off several existing surveillance work streams supported by partners such as the Gates Foundation and the Global Fund that include establishing and digitizing national health campaigns, building collaborative surveillance capacity in the country, and establishing and realizing, operationalizing a climate and health strategy for the National Public Health Institute. All of this will further ensure the success of the project. Through this foundation and these partnerships, we are able to bring together the necessary government and implementing partner agencies with other stakeholders to ensure the project is viewed not only as a government-owned project, but a key component of the government's emergency response strategy includes the proper capacity building to ensure sustainability, which is particularly important to me, and will have continuous monitoring and evaluation to make sure it is able to deliver the expected outputs. Furthermore, we have the necessary experience and expertise to generate operationally relevant risk projections by combining remote sensing data with existing country data. And while we have a very clear idea of the roadmap and what we need to do in the future, we are obviously open to collaborations. We've heard many similar projects today and can think of various different ways that we could collaborate and help each other out. So if this system is in place, we can ensure success by evaluating the costs associated with the public health responses that occurred prior to the project being implemented to those after it was implemented. Unfortunately, weather events such as cyclones will continue to occur in Mozambique, so we will be able to directly compare the public health impacts after these events, when and where, using this program, to those when and where the program was not in use. This inclusion, the inclusion of community-led data collection will also allow us to evaluate the accuracy and utility of our remote sensing data, which will not only provide us with the opportunity to improve our program, but also to provide critical feedback on the overall accuracy of these data sources in general. Thank you for your time, and I hope to be working with you in the future.
Awesome, thank you so much. That was a super end-to-end view of the project, and I loved all of the thoughtfulness in the assessment as well. If, yeah, we could have our panelists jump back on, getting them featured here on the back end. Is there someone who would like to kick us off with a question?
Question. So thanks, James. This is really interesting. One, you mentioned briefly kind of connecting these with the cash anticipatory action and payments. I'm wondering if you've tested that already, or how you're thinking about it, kind of how the money would flow, and just kind of more the technicalities of how this would work.
Yeah, we haven't explored that yet, or haven't tested it out yet, I should say. And so I think that's still an area of uncertainty over exactly how that would work. I think our vision is, we've been working with Resolve to Save Lives on the collaborative surveillance project, and they had sort of an emergency response fund that's available for this kind of situation. And my vision is kind of to use that, but more in an anticipatory way, obviously, so that we can sort of, in much like the previous, some specific examples would be similar to our previous speaker talking about the number of nets needed, or whether or not specific health facilities will be inaccessible. Do we need to shift commodities from one to others? Do we need to move our focus on community or case management for malaria and cholera to community health workers? And so ideally this money would flow through the government, but if there are key agencies or partners, implementing partners such as IFRC or Médecins Sans Frontières, who definitely work in Mozambique, that have an established role within the government, for example, their emergency response system, then I think that we could move money to them as well. I think I just want to make sure that, you know, everybody is coordinated with this. So that's kind of one of the key components of this system, is ensuring that there's no duplication of efforts, and everything is sort of integrated within a larger strategy to avoid that sort of duplication in parallel work streams.
That makes a lot of sense, this kind of system-wide look at how these actors all fit together. I think we have time for one more question if we have room from a panelist. If not, I also have one. Alrighty. You talked about the different kinds of hazard, risks, exposure, vulnerability that go into determining that kind of broader risk factor. How do you all kind of communicate these assumptions that are built into that in a way that is kind of understandable by folks who might be making decisions based on that overall risk assessment, so that they know like what is prioritized, what maybe different weights, different data points are assigned?
Yeah, I think so. That's one of the areas that I'm actually open to feedback on, and because it's sort of putting together right now the best guess is based on literature, but what we need to do in order to finalize this is sit down with the in-country experts to build on that expertise that they have. And I think ideally we would want to incorporate local knowledge on resiliency and vulnerability. The country's done a vulnerability and adaptation assessment. We're sort of helping them do an additional one soon at the health facility and ideally community level, but we don't have a whole lot of data in terms of how specific indicators relate to, or at the community level at least, how specific indicators relate to, for example, disease outbreaks. But that said, we do have a good idea. I've been working in the country for over 10 years now on malaria. So with the different relationships we have a very good idea of what data sources are there, because obviously that's part of it. One of the key parts of it is what's available, to answer your question, and then how do those available data sets relate to, for example, malaria risk. And so, you know, I think that we'll still sit down with them and have a workshop to finalize some of these final weights and data inputs, and how we rank districts accordingly and what those cutoffs would be. But I think that understanding it as risk, to me, rather than like a projection or a prediction, is one of the key things. You know, I struggled really hard and fought really hard to incorporate some kind of uncertainty into that initial early warning system that I discussed, which is heavily statistical, so that countries would know, you know, when we say we expect there to be an outbreak in this area, or it's above the threshold, the level of incidence that's as expected is above the threshold, to know with what level of confidence we have with that kind of projection. And so this sort of incorporates that by saying we're saying that there's risk. We're not saying it's with 100% or 90% confidence it's going to happen, but this is where the risk is highest. And then we could, if the country is comfortable with 3 or 4 categories of risk, then, you know, that sort of obviously makes it a little bit more granular, less granular. But if they want to move to 10 levels, then we can do that too. But ultimately, it depends on what kind of different responses you have. Having 10 levels of risk doesn't make any sense if you only have 2 different types of responses, right? So these are all things that we'll be taking into account during this process.
Awesome, thank you for that. A lot of details that have a big and sometimes undecipherable impact once you get to kind of the broader risk. Well, great work, James. Thank you, panelists, for your questions. There might be some stuff in the chat, and I'll hand it back over to Ree.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, James. Big round of applause for the team at CHI and IFRC. Great questions and great responses from James. We're down to our last one, everyone. The moment is here. But to take us home, certainly not least, but our last group here is a leader in global health. They've been assisting health ministries in tailoring interventions based on improved understanding of community vulnerability through segmentation. We're going to hear from Michael and Anna as they talk about their approach to modernize methods integrating climate and satellite data into their tools. So team, the floor is yours. Anna, we can see your slides, but I think you're still on mute.
Of course I am. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're great.
Perfect. Okay, trying to get back over to my slides so I can see them. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your attention and stamina over this long session of the past 4 hours. I have been so inspired by the fellow finalists. There's been so much learning and certainly possibility and potential for further collaboration. It really feels like we're among friends here. My name is Anna Rapp. I'm joined today by my colleagues Michael Kalnoky and Daniel Helden from Sonder Collective. We're a group of researchers, designers, and implementers working on a novel global public health approach called Pathways. Imagine yourself in the seat of a decision maker at the Ministry of Health in a low-income country. You're harried, funding is scarce, your staff are stretched thin, and climate and health challenges are growing. Meanwhile, funders want more precision and accountability, and funding is getting even tighter. You need to prioritize. But how? Who's most at risk and why? What data would help you to make smart, targeted decisions? That's where Pathways comes in. Pathways brings together data and research to uncover the root causes of poor health and to identify effective solutions. We do this using population segmentation to group people not just by demographics, but by their shared drivers of vulnerability. We're already providing these data and the guidance on how to use them to decision makers in 7 countries. With your help, we plan to improve and expand this methodology to even better capture environmental and climate vulnerability into a platform that's already poised for broad use and rapid scale-up. We all know that it's not just biology that determines whether someone gets sick or stays healthy. There are many indirect, non-medical drivers of illness that matter. For example, let's think about your income. It affects your access to prevention, diagnosis, and treatment services. It affects your baseline nutritional status and stress levels, your resilience to disease. It affects the number of people that you share a room with, so how many germs you're exposed to. And relevant to this group, it compounds with other hazards to affect your health even more. For instance, poorer people have less resilience to respond or adapt to natural disasters and are much more likely to suffer ill health effects as a result. Pathways incorporates several dozen social, environmental, occupational, cultural, and other non-medical factors, which we gather in our own surveys or in broad population household surveys like DHS. We then categorize across 6 vulnerability domains and use these, along with mathematical segmentation approaches, which are already widely used in the private sector, to divide a population into groups or segments of people who are similar in terms of the drivers or the root causes of poor reproductive, maternal, and child health outcomes. This allows us a more nuanced understanding of which groups are vulnerable to which kind of health issues, how we can identify them, and the best ways to intervene. Segments allow for deep, rich insights into women's lives. Even 2 women with similar vulnerability levels might have vastly different reasons for that vulnerability. The real power of segmentation, however, comes in its use. We're making all of this data available in a free digital platform so that policymakers, strategists, and implementers can more efficiently and effectively identify, target, tailor, and measure their health interventions. One concrete example of the use of pathways data comes from Lagos, Nigeria, where segmentation fundamentally changed the way that a health intervention was designed and implemented. Despite high ownership of phones in the general population, 86% of women owned a phone here. The more and most vulnerable segments of women used basic feature phones if they had a phone at all. Less than a third of them had internet access, and most relied on calls rather than text. Understanding that inequity and knowing that the critical health services needed to reach these people who were already more at risk led to a substantial restructuring of the intervention and the strategy. The project team moved fully away from high-tech solutions like chatbots and apps, and instead focused on physical touch points like kiosks in a marketplace and voice communication. As a result, they're now seeing a jump in the most vulnerable enrollees from 8% to 48% of beneficiaries. So you might be wondering, how do climate and environment figure in here? There's little question that environmental hazards such as excessive heat, flooding, air quality, and drought have a growing and disproportionate negative impact on the health outcomes of most vulnerable populations. Segmentation helps us to identify which people are at highest risk of bad outcomes and helps us to think about how to prevent those outcomes. Though two women living in the same geographic area might experience similar exposure to climate events, their ability to adapt to these events, as well as their health sensitivity to the events, could look much different. Women in the most vulnerable groups are less able to cope, more reliant on natural resources, and already have less resilient baseline health status. We already collect and analyze a range of environmental determinants in determining some segmentations. Those include land use, livelihoods related to the environment, water and sanitation practices, and migration patterns. What we're proposing to do now is to substantially augment the rigor and richness of data related to climate hazards by adding variables that are best measured by remote sensing data. With some modest additional funding support, we would be able to integrate Earth observation data into our existing country data sets and to create a replicable process for any future analysis. This gets climate data into a platform that's already being widely deployed and into the hands of people who can act on it. We're proposing adding multi-hazard climate models to capture a large range of possible environmental vulnerabilities. Things like floods, drought, food and water insecurity, heat events, extreme weather, wildfires, increased likelihood of vector-borne diseases, and air and water pollution. Lots of things we've talked about already today. Combining exposure, adaptability, and health sensitivity to climate events helps us to better identify which groups are actually at greater risk. This type of approach has been piloted in high-income settings, but we're not aware of it being used in lower-income countries. A recent literature review found no published evidence of climate change exposure combined with reproductive, maternal, newborn, and child health outcomes. Our approach is aligned with the IPCC framework around climate change and its impact, and with WHO's framework for building climate change resilient health systems. We're not talking about an additional framework here, but rather a way to allow implementers to operationalize and act upon data. Our early exploration of climate data has reinforced why this is important. For instance, analysis using satellite data on high temperature exposures demonstrates that more vulnerable subpopulations, especially those in rural areas, live in areas with an average of 30% more frequent high temperature days in Nigeria than less vulnerable groups. You can see here how we've merged wet bulb temperature data with the household survey data that forms the basis of our segmentation, understanding at a granular level who lives where. And here you can see the clear relationship between vulnerability and exposure to those heat events. To our knowledge, this kind of analysis, combining vulnerability to multiple health outcomes and climate exposure data, is the first of its kind in low-income settings. With about $500,000 in support, we can do three things. First, build capacity, training our data scientists and public health experts to integrate climate data and to integrate more fully into the climate and health community. Second, we can develop infrastructure, integrating satellite data and building the back end for hosting it on our platform. And third, conducting field research, partnering with implementers in one of our pathways countries to explore how people perceive and respond to climate and health risks, and to better understand how to capture and encode health sensitivity and adaptability to climate risk. We'll also work with partners and the government to incorporate the findings into policy and practice, for instance, into national adaptation plans. We'll also lean on existing partnerships with donors and with multilateral partners to continue to think about scale up. We know that environmental hazards compound with other vulnerabilities to negatively affect health. A robust look at environmental variables is still missing from the Pathways framework today. The Pathways approach is already a frame of reference for health decision makers to think about efficiency, prioritization, and program design. We think there's a big opportunity here to more robustly bring climate thinking into the mix as well. A relatively small upfront investment in capacity and methodological improvement could yield a large return on investment. Pathways is already being used in 7 countries by over 20 partners, including national ministries of health. By embedding climate data directly into a tool that's already trusted and in use, we can help decision makers act faster and smarter. The barrier to effective climate and health response isn't lack of data. It's lack of access to the right data at the right time. Pathways can help change that. With your support, we can give countries the tools to better understand how climate affects health and what they can do about it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. That is our final presentation. Thank you for taking us home in such a fantastic manner. Really loved learning more about Pathways. I will turn it over to our panelists for some questions. We have some time. Feel free to just jump off mute and share your reflections or questions.
My question was on prioritizing the budget. So basically, I understand the value of segmentation and the value it adds to national programs. But when there are health ministries which are having budget constraints for basic things like vaccination or medicine delivery, how do you ensure that they can carve out a budget for such a thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think that there's an efficiency argument to be made for this kind of vulnerability segmentation, because it's not the immunization program alone thinking about who it needs to prioritize, or the maternal health program alone thinking about who it needs to prioritize. It's really thinking holistically about women and communities and understanding where risk of a whole bunch of poor health outcomes might be. It also helps you think about interventions which might have knock-on effects across programs. I'll also say that because we're building this as a global good, I think there's learning both within countries where multiple implementing partners, multiple stakeholders within a government could utilize the data, but also the potential for learning across countries and thinking about the potential for resource optimization. I think you can also think a bit about the most efficient pathway toward impact here, targeting only the people who really need to be targeted with a particular intervention.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Nachiket, for the question. Anything from Maria, John, or Danielle?
Can you talk just a little bit more about the global good piece and how that would be kind of organizationally and administratively? I don't know what other terms, but can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are currently funded by the Gates Foundation and are developing a digital tool. This will be a platform that includes an explorer for being able to slice and dice data in the ways that you want, to include qualitative insights, profiles of segmentations across all of the countries that we currently have data for and are developing. That's open source, freely available to anyone who wants to use it. Quite transparently, we're figuring out the long-term sustainability plan for this. We think of ourselves at Sonder as the innovators and incubators of the methodology. We know we're not the right long-term home for it. We're actively collaborating with multilaterals and also thinking about low-income, middle-income country academic and implementing partners who might be interested in partnering with us to figure out what the long-term plan might look like.
Do you have a hypothesis about what the best organization type would be to kind of be the long-term home for a global good?
I think it's a really tough question. And in an era of additional sort of resource constraint, I think additional questions come to mind there, particularly around the need for potential ongoing donor support. I do think multilateral agencies like UNICEF, who already think a lot about vulnerability, might be a really powerful collaborator. We've also talked quite a bit with some regional, nonprofit, non-governmental agencies based on the continent of Africa and India.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Maria or Danielle, any comments or questions from your end?
One, I'd like to jump in on. I'm a bit biased, but I saw Jacaranda Health listed on one of your slides as one of your partners. So they're an alumni of our portfolio. So would love to hear what your work looked like with that partner.
Absolutely. I can start, Michael and Daniel, if you have any details to add. That's work in Kenya, applying the segmentation specifically to a digital health intervention and understanding needs of different segments of the population there. I'm happy, Danielle, to share additional information. I'm not super close to the program. Michael, Daniel, I don't know if you have other bits to add there.
Yeah, none on my end, Danielle, but we're more than happy to follow up. We have the folks on staff that can pull all the information together.
Awesome. I love to see that connection. I at least didn't know that. I don't think we knew that connection yet. All righty. We are pretty much at time. Rhiannon?
Yeah.
I'm looking around as if I can see you.
We certainly
Thank
are.
you so much. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, Laura, I'll echo that and just say thank you so much. Great job, Anna. Great job, team. And we are on time in just a few more minutes here before we wrap. I've got some exciting results, of course, to share. But before we get there, and also just to buy my team a little bit more time while they do this, I'd love to first kick us off with a set of thank yous for all of the incredible teams that you just saw here on the list. So I'm going to forward ahead. Bear with me. So please give a big round of applause for all 12 teams today. If you haven't already clapped enough, please do. Bravo. They've all been preparing for months to give you a concise rendering and pitch of what is really incredibly detailed, thoughtful work. So hopefully you all felt that in the same way that I did. We will certainly be making the recording available to everybody, so stay tuned for that. You can continue to revisit your favorite moments, talk more about it, make connections where it makes sense, please. Again, like we said, the conversation really just starts today, but it takes a lot of collaboration to get these things to scale, as we all know. I also, of course, want to give a big shout out to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for all of your thoughtfulness, for sticking with us, for being willing to represent your organizations, not only personally, but also bringing forth all the immense resources that you all represent. This is how we do this work. Like I said before, it's really doing it at scale and doing it together. I also need to give a big thank you to NASA for really making what we do here at NASA Lifelines possible. So to any of our NASA partners who are on the line, thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll be bringing the resources of NASA to bear, of course, in terms of data and tools, but also more connections moving forward. So please stay tuned to all of that. I also, though, am excited to give a big shout out to the NASA Lifelines team itself. And those of you Ready for Impact finalist teams have gotten a chance to interact with us. The rest of you might not know my incredible team, and I need to name them all because they're the reason we're making all of these connections, and they're the ones working hard behind the scenes for things to run seamlessly today. So Jeff, Laura, Rufai, James, Seamus, Nicole, Reese, thank you so much for all of your incredible work. Thank you for continuing to be resources, not only to the teams this year, but the teams last year. And hopefully you are all feeling that support and love. Many, many, many thanks. Next, again, last thing before I start to reveal our crowd results is a request from the Lifelines team. We've just launched our latest community survey. This for us is really mission critical. It's how we make our design decisions and prioritize the work that we do in terms of building this community. So please, please, please take 5 minutes, finish the survey today, finish it over the next week. Like I said, it's going to be really helpful for us as we figure out the road ahead and how we can best serve you all. So take some time, share your thoughts, reach out to us. It's an open door as always. With that, if a drum roll, I cannot simulate on my side well enough, but I want to share the crowd results. Rufai, are we ready? I don't want to preempt anything that I shouldn't. I know we're in our last minute here, though. I think we're ready, hopefully. And I might have to stop sharing to update the slides. Our third place. Thank you all. Here, I'll stop sharing. I might have to share again. We got them in. Here we go. Real time, team. Real time. All right, back to PowerPoint. I know the anticipation is getting you like it is me because I also don't know quite yet. PowerPoint live. Third place from the crowd is the Urban Malaria Lab, IFOMA and team. Fantastic, really, really great pitch in terms of your work around malaria in Nigeria. Congratulations to IFOMA and the team there for a fantastic job today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody connect with IFOMA and the team too. If you don't already have her contact information, we'll make sure you are all put in touch. And next, our second place team per the crowd is Usafiri, fantastic. Pratik, Antoine, bravo, très bien. Really fantastic job presenting what you're doing across a number of countries and with some really incredible interdisciplinary approaches. So Usafiri, bravo, well done. Please connect with the team there as well. And last but not least, our first place for the crowd is DASTAA by NAXA. They went first and they stole the show and kept it up even to the end. Bravo team, Uttam, Poonam, everybody over at the team at NAXA. Really fantastic through and through. So first and foremost, thank you teams, thank you audience for bearing with us. It's been a fantastic showcase today. If you're not already officially a part of the NASA Lifelines community, you are today by being here and joining us. But please sign up, stay tuned for all the incredible activities we'll have ahead. And for now, this is Rhiannon and the Lifelines team signing off. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day or your morning, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.